Welcome into the Fan Midday Show inside the DriveFever.com studios. Jimmy Cook, James Boyd with Eddie Garrison. Champagne bottles perhaps popped from West Lafayette to anywhere else the Purdue alumni base extends as star center and National Player of the Year Zach Edey announced on Twitter last night his intention to return to Purdue for a fourth season. That's the biggest news around the state as things stands right now. We'll dive into that a ton within this first segment. Michael Scotto, Sam King, Cameron Wolfe, Charles McDonald will take us through a path of both college basketball, the NBA, and NFL offseason activity throughout today's show. But we begin first with that news out of Purdue. We made our predictions yesterday. I tipped the cap to Edey for the boldness there because there were rumblings throughout this draft process.
I just couldn't be the guy that went with the same. I just couldn't.
So I shouldn't praise you for the boldness. I should praise you for being a contrarian. Is that what we're now revealing a day after?
I was just a sole contrarian yesterday. Okay. Like, I had no belief that he was actually going. I just wanted to be contrarian just so that if it came back tomorrow, as in today, and he left to go to the NBA, I'd be like, ha! Told you.
All right, so I won't waste 2.5, 3 minutes giving you praise for something that you just did out of spite. So I respect the spite move then, and we'll move things right along. But for us, because I've talked to Purdue fans about this, there was still a sense of it's actually going to happen. We'll believe it when we see it type of thing. You and I made our prediction, and Edey obviously felt this way too, of he's going to come back. In today's day and age with NIL where it is, I know that Zach Edey had some complications in regards to obtaining a proper visa to be able to earn even more NIL money, and that process you would assume has been clarified and smoothed out to the point that he is now going to receive the type of NIL treatment that players of his caliber are now receiving in college athletics. Not a big surprise that he's there, but it definitely resets things, which we'll get into in a moment, for where we think expectations should be for the Purdue Boilermakers going into 2023-24. Let's start first with the news itself. James, I know that you're on the NFL beat, but you still have that love for college basketball. You still have that love for the game in general at any level, having covered a number of different levels across the basketball circuit, the highest of which with the Pacers a season ago in the NBA. For you, the process that led to this, the deadline that everybody was facing, and as you joked about, you were finishing up, playing a little pickup at the Y yesterday and still checking in between plays every now and again to see when the news would finally break. It eventually happens around 9 o'clock last night.
Yeah, not a surprise at all. I really was just thinking to myself, okay, when are you going to stop holding your fans hostage because they're so excited to find out if you're going to come back? I liken it similarly to when I was covering Illinois and Kofi Cockburn was entering the NBA draft and he came back for another season. So when it does officially get announced, the fans go crazy, they get excited, and I believe the excitement down there in West Lafayette is warranted because for as much as we talk about what Zach Edey can't do as far as being an NBA prospect, he still was the consensus National Player of the Year, first team All-American, and obviously teams do not get better when you lose those kind of players. So to have him return and then have the players around him have more experience and then get a couple transfers to come in, or at least one transfer to come in, it makes a huge difference. And I'm looking at his NIL valuation on on3.com. They always do a good job of kind of giving you a rough estimate of what they're making. And his annual value is $827,000. And I would not be surprised if it went up this upcoming season because he probably could have sold 100,000 shirts last night just by coming back. So that's always a factor in it. But I do think another factor that we can't just gloss over is the way it ended. I do think had they gone on that Final Four run that they are so, it seems like allergic to or they just can't get to in this era with Matt Painter. If they had done that last season, I do think that may have changed the calculation a little bit because you don't feel this bad taste in your mouth like you did last year, losing to Fairleigh Dickinson in the first round and being upset in dramatic fashion. And what I believe was the biggest upset. I know it wasn't the first 1 versus 16, but it wasn't even like Fairleigh Dickinson won their conference or won their league to get into the NCAA tournament. They got in, I believe, on a technicality, and so they get in, and then they beat you, and so it was just the most ridiculous thing ever. And so, Purdue fans are happy, but as we were just talking about before we went live, everything for them, Purdue, Matt Painter, Zach Edey, is postseason. I will not discredit them if they go back-to-back Big Ten regular season champs, tournament champs. However, everyone knows, especially them, that it does not matter unless you get to a Final Four, next season.
There's a couple things to unpack with that. First, I agree with half of your sentiment there, which is that the bar is set whether Purdue fans are ready for it or not. The bar is set with what they have returning in Zach Edey, what they have with another year under their belt with this roster, and we'll get into that again as the show moves on. But the expectation has been set of bringing their first Final Four banner since 1980. That is the goal for Purdue basketball this season. It's obviously the goal every year, but that should be the bar that you are measuring a strong, successful season for this club. Now, that being said, March Madness, for all we talk about in every other walk of sports, even with a 7-game series in the NBA playoffs, is as random, is as difficult as any to make a deep run like that. What I want out of my team when I am rooting in any sport is I need high-level competency and a certain level of leadership and understanding of where a bar or expectation is set from my coaching staff. Matt Painter, in terms of that walk of life, top 2, top 3 within not just his own conference, probably within all of active college basketball coaches right now. I think Matt Painter is great for the game. I think Matt Painter is an exceptional coach. I will not be sitting here if they, let's say, make the Elite Eight and miss out on a Final Four a year from now and saying, Matt Painter's got to go. If they were to stumble again in the first or second round, when you look at what Purdue's been able to do the last couple of recruiting cycles and obviously retaining Zach Edey and what they did in the transfer portal this year, it's clear their staff knows what they're doing and filling their needs. But if you have another nightmare scenario for Purdue fans where it joins the list of Fairleigh Dickinson, of North Texas, of Arkansas Little Rock, where it's an undersized team with way better guard play and you get bounced again, then I hear your frustration. But I'm never going to put that on a coach of, if they miss out on the Final Four, maybe it's time to look a different direction. Because I look at what Purdue is and what Matt Painter has built, and if you remove him from that program, I think you're looking at a solid 3 to 5 years minimum before you're back to even where this conversation is today right now. That being said, I'm not giving a pass for Purdue. I'm not saying that it's okay if they come up short, but my blame is not going to be on Matt Painter, assuming it's not another early first round or second round disappointing exit. If they are beyond a second weekend team, if they are on the doorstep of the Final Four but lose a close one in the Elite Eight, it's not what a Purdue fan wants to hear. I get that. I understand it. They're hungry to get back. They're hungry to raise another Final Four banner. It's been far too long. But my expectation for them is, the goal is, yes, make the Final Four. But so much for me with Matt Painter on that equation depends on how their potential exit or shortcoming of a Final Four occurs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I also think that fans are really unfair. So you're going to get killed either way.
Sure.
But I do believe, like you said, it depends on the manner in which you go out. You just can't fall on your face like you've done a few years. And I am really in the camp of the grass is not greener if you get rid of Matt Painter. I think that you think it's not good enough now, and that's fair. However, it is very hard to have sustained excellence in college basketball because of the reasons you said, in regards to the NCAA tournament, which is obviously more hyperbolic of how it looks. But the teams that are year in and year out competing for their league, making the NCAA tournament every season, that is something that you almost can take for granted. But I think when it comes to Purdue in particular, you've had number 1 ranking in back-to-back seasons. You've been a top 5 program. You've had elite talent with Jaden Ivey, Trevion Williams, and then you also had Zach Edey. And so these are all players where you're looking like you need to be able to hang a banner with some iteration of this era of Purdue basketball. And I think that that's the monkey that they have to get off their back, and that's what they're up against. Now, it may not be fair in every sense of the word, but when you're looked at or you want to establish yourself as one of the best teams in your league, one of the best programs in the country, you have to have something to back that up. I mean, we look at the programs that we always expect to be there, the Dukes, the Kansas. For a long time, it was Syracuse. Obviously, not last season. It was pretty rough. And then you look at, a lot of these programs around, even the Big Ten, there's history that needs to be made there. And when you talk about not having a banner, Final Four banner since 1980, man, that's 43 years. And at some point, you have to be able to get over the hump. And even if you don't, like I said, you can't go out like they've gone out in years past, where it's just embarrassing, fall flat on your face, and you look completely overmatched from a guard play standpoint. Because to me, the first thing every fan will look at, doesn't take a lot of analysis, whenever they make it to the NCAA tournament, assuming they get there, which they will unless they have a catastrophic season, assuming they get there, Jimmy, you got to look at, does the team have a little old guard? Because if they do, they're going to crush. He's going to slay the dragon again. I mean, that's what it is. It seems like every year, if you look and see, okay, do they have a dynamic junior, senior, fifth-year guard that can just wreak havoc and really put Zach Edey in a bunch of pick and rolls and make him and the rest of the defense pay because you just can't keep this little water bug out of the paint or from controlling the offense. So we'll see, but obviously today Purdue fans should be happy because, him coming back obviously makes you one of the best teams in the country.
That pressure to me shifts most to Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer because you look at the way that game fizzled out and it ultimately died for Purdue against Fairleigh Dickinson was something that we had talked about and warned, and Purdue fans were aware of it, but we had warned people in the lead up to that game and throughout the entirety of the season that there's situations where the confidence is not there from beyond the arc. The confidence is not there from your shooters, not there from your guards, and then it reared its ugly head, magnified times 10 against Fairleigh Dickinson in that first round matchup. Is that something that I think is a carryover in the next year? No, I fully expect massive leaps forward once again from Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer as they have a full season under their belts now. But Matt Painter had stressed this throughout last year, which was they need to do things to take pressure off Zach Edey. They need to be able to do things as an offense where they're not so reliant on just,
that's true.
Hey, Zach, go get yourself a bucket and let's go win this thing and everything will be fine. That's not to say it's not a bad strategy. In other words, times where at the end of the game, even though there's double and triple teams coming at Edey, it's like, just throw it up there. Let him go get it. It'll be fine. You need to be able, from a spacing perspective and from, not that there's a blueprint to beat Purdue, but if you're not able to reestablish yourself like they did for times last season, not the entire year, but there were flashes of it where you're able to make teams pay, they're going to stack inside and focus solely on Edey. If you're not able to do that, I'm not saying they can't have the same success they had in the regular season, but at some point, there's going to be a ceiling for how far you can go. I think that gets washed away. I really do expect a giant leap forward from Purdue, particularly at guard, which would, again, in theory, open up yet another dominant season for Zach Edey.
Yeah, it was very much a grade school type of basketball sometimes where it's like just throw it to the big kid in the middle and let him score. But to your point, I completely agree with how the offense has to look when the game gets tight because we can look at basketball as a whole, and I believe Nikola Jokic is about the only big man in America right now that you can run your entire offense through no matter time, score, situation, because he can handle the ball, he can shoot, he can do all those things. But when it gets tight in the fourth quarter, it's very hard to run your offense solely through Zach Edey because you have to throw it to him on the block. He's going to get double teamed. He's not going to turn and face up and jab step and shoot over you. It's very much back to the basket, and I think that shrinks your floor, especially when your guards aren't knocking down outside shots. So I do believe, I don't know if it's because of Braden Smith taking a step forward, Fletcher Lawyer taking a step forward, but they need someone on the perimeter to be able to create their own shot and at least get them a good look, whether it's penetration, a drive, a floater, something like that, to open them up because they do become so one-dimensional, especially when they're not making shots. Because even in that Fairleigh Dickinson game, it became so evident where it's just like, we're going to throw it to him and hope that he saves us. from this collapse, and it doesn't work against teams that are more talented or as talented as you. I think at some point you have to be able to out-scheme them, and again, throwing it to the big kid on the block isn't the best scheme when it comes to, a postseason success.
I just keep going back to, even if you were the most diehard of Purdue fans, there was still a sense of, like we mentioned to start the show, I need to see this happen before it's happened. I need to be able to know for a fact. And that's just by nature, right? The running joke amongst Purdue fans is, and some of it isn't a joke, some of it is talking through the pain and the suffering that's there. And everything bad usually happens to us. So, of course, why would our national player of the year come back? But now that he's back again, today should be, last night as well, a day of celebration if you're a Purdue fan. Because he is as dominant a player in college basketball as there is right now. National reigning player of the year.
True.
I get it. I know that the knock on him and why he's coming back to Purdue is a large part that his style of play is not a dominant de facto, you can't do anything to stop me type of player at the next level.
Right.
But we know it's still there in the college game, and I joke all the time about it. Feels like there's a continual revolving door where Matt Painter is just building big men in a lab, and each iteration gets better and better and better. And Zach Edey is obviously the masterpiece of that lab work, if you will. With him coming back, and I know that we discussed this a little bit before we went on the air with Edey, but with him coming back, the Final Four, you mentioned this earlier, is where the hunger really is for Purdue fans. But you mentioned two things: being the most dominant team in your conference and having something to show for it, and then being the most dominant team in the country and having something to show for it. They have plenty from the former, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They continue to show Big Ten excellence, Big Ten dominance. They will, at least any year, doesn't matter if you stopped watching basketball for 2 or 3 seasons, then you came back around. So Matt Painter was still there. Oh, where's Purdue? Oh, yeah, they're at top 2, top 3 to win the Big Ten. Oh, yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. They're used to that kind of thing. But it's that next step forward that you're referencing, where it's not to say that there isn't the same level of pedigree within the fan base as other top-tier programs, but there is just as much of a hunger. Purdue fans want to be able to have true, recognizable success with this program, not just for those that are on the floor, not just for Matt Painter, but for themselves, because they care about this team so much. And there's not anything of note outside of individual accolades and Big Ten championships, which, again, aren't easy to come by. Like, that doesn't deserve to be just brushed aside.
As the Illinois guy, I'd take a few of those.
Exactly. You ask any team in the Big Ten, I think Rutgers would probably do some things to be able to raise a Big Ten banner or two. No doubt about that. But you get so used to commonplace, and you want more. And it's fair to want more in that regard, especially when, I don't want to say it's fully unprecedented, but having a player as talented as Zach Edey getting an opportunity or choosing the opportunity to come back one more year, it should. I'm not saying Purdue fans should run around like they've won something when they haven't, but the feelings of, and I got this from a couple buddy of mine that Purdue fans, some people on Twitter that are Purdue fans, of woe is us, we're going to lose. Like, this was a conversation I had 2 weeks ago, before the Zach Edey news happened, was the loss to Fairleigh Dickinson broke me. I've given up on this team. Like, this is just what's destined to happen. And I don't really blame them, but you should go in reverse a little bit from that stance if you're a Purdue fan, knowing honestly what is coming back. Because do I think it is ludicrous to say, look what Virginia did when they got beat by UMBC. They came back and won the thing next year. It's going to be us. Yes, that's clinically insane because it's very, very hard to do. It's insanely hard to win in March and be the last team on top of the mountain. It's good to dream. Very hard to be like, oh, yeah, that's what we're going to do, unless you're being a clown, which props to you. All that said, though, it should be a reset in terms of your feelings as a Purdue fan for hope once again. The hope that kills you, so to speak. Allow that into your life one more time. Because if it doesn't happen this go-around with Zach Edey back, I'm just talking Final Four. I'm not talking national championship. If it doesn't happen this go-around, then I'm willing to tell you, okay, go ahead, put your head in the pillow and just pack it in terms of your Purdue hopes for what they can do as a program.
Yeah, I mean, they're in that spot where in sports we always hold people to the level of their success. And by that I mean they have a bigger target on their back because they've proven that they can do all the other steps except for the last one, which is have the magical run in the NCAA tournament. And is that unfair? Like if you look at other programs, I mean, again, being an Illinois guy, they're having the same conversation down there in Champaign where you're hoping that they can have some postseason success, but it has not been the regular season success to back that up where it's like we're not sick of, but we've hit this wall that we can't climb over. And so that's the beauty and the struggle of having a really successful program, but not having that last crown jewel to say, this is what we did when we finally put it all together. Because I don't think any Purdue player, coach, fan would tell you that they felt a sense of completeness at the end of these, last few years with Jaden Ivey, with Zach Edey, with Trevion Williams. And so these are the breaks when you're looked at as one of the top teams in your conference year in and year out. And the last 2 seasons, at least, one of the best teams in the country. I mean, you cannot be ranked number 1 at any point and then get bounced in the first round. And although you've won your conference championship, your tournament championship, I don't think you can feel complete. I mean, I don't think any team obviously feels 100% complete unless you win it all at the end of the season. However, a Final Four is really, really significant, and you know what that means. And so we'll see how it goes. However, again, today, Purdue fans rejoice. You got Zach Edey back, and I do think that as much as UIU people to troll him,
hold on a second.
like to troll him like he is some scrub, he is still the best player in the country, at least last year as the contested national player of the year.
Let's pump the brakes with me for a second, okay? I'm not going to be the voice of the entirety of
No, this
IU
is you.
Here. Hold up.
All of them are you. No,
Whoa. I get annoyed with Zach Edey because of how talented he is. I'm not going to sit here, and I've never have, by the way, as a fan. I've said unpleasantries towards the television in frustration because I continue to see Purdue big man just dominate the game. And there's been times, even though, should be noted for the record, there was only one team in this state that had broomsticks on the other this year, and it was the team towards the southern area of the state. Thank you very much. Just want that to be on the record.
Yes, this is on the record, and that's why, as the petty person that I am, I'm glad he's back again for that reason. Yep. I mean, people can talk about the rivalry, and it's always going to be a rivalry, right? No matter who's lacing it up. But when you have a player like him rejoining that rivalry, and I don't know if I can call it that. IU fans are probably rolling their eyes right now like, oh, we whooped them last year. But you get what I'm saying, like the battle of the state, so to speak. I thoroughly enjoy that he's coming back because win or loss, there's going to be so much animosity and vitriol that I just can't wait to see because that's what, within reason, makes college basketball so fun.
There's a checklist for Zach Edey, I'm sure, no doubt, at least whether it's on paper or in his mind, of things he wants to achieve this year. A sweep of IU, I'm sure, is somewhere on that list, depending on where your ranking system is. But of course, the biggest is ultimately raising a Final Four banner and potentially even winning a national championship for Purdue. Again, regardless of the program, way easier said than done. One other thing in terms of takeaways from this successful return by Zach Edey, everybody is always concerned or confused or lost in the woods of what NIL is going to do to a program. How's your program going to attack it? Are they going to get left behind? Mm-hmm. Or are they going to be willing to adjust on the fly, accept it as part of college basketball now, and make things happen to seal a deal on a transfer, seal a deal on a recruit? If you ever had a moment of doubt or fear for Purdue's willingness to play in this arena, it was washed away last night. Because we're never going to get the official numbers, but you mentioned the I don't have the site in front of me that you'd reference.
Yeah, on
800,000 you'd say.
Yeah, 827 is his annual value, give or take.
I bet it's 7 figures. Like north of that, and you alluded to that as well. We'll never officially know that total of what it is, but it is the name of the game right now in terms of if you're a college player and you feel like there's an opportunity for you. Like some people want to speculate that a number of the players that were taking their time last night were trying to squeeze out every dollar and cents that they could. Whether that was the case or not, good for you. Like if you are a college athlete right now and you're on the fence about where your NBA dreams lie versus where you could make a little bit more money and play for a school you love at Purdue, I have no problem with that. If that's what it was for Edey, great. If it's not, he was just weighing things over or wanted to have the flair for the dramatic with his Wolf of Wall Street gif, that's fine. I'm totally cool with that. But Purdue showed they're willing to play in this arena. They've shown that consistently, but now at the highest level, because you look at how much money you're going to dole out, that's probably near the top of NIL, I would think, in terms of, maybe not the tippy top in college basketball, but for what you're going to see on Purdue's books that we will never see, that shows you they're not afraid to play around here.
No, and I think the best programs in the country are the ones, I won't say best, but the smartest programs are the ones who lean into it and use it. When I was covering Illinois athletics, they had a whole seminar and class where they kind of broke it down to each athlete, what businesses they would help them partner with and things like that. And that was just the infancy of NIL. And now to see it, a year and a half later or whatever it is, it makes sense. I mean, looking at it to pivot away from Purdue, it works for IU. If you can tell a player, hey, we're a national brand. We just had a player go one and done. We got another player who's probably going to go in the first round, in Trace Jackson Davis. If you can say that and then also sell them on the performance of your program, and then on top of that tell them, hey, you're going to get paid if you come here, why not add that in as something to sell your program on? And I think that only becomes a distraction if you let that precede all the things that helped you get to that point. Now, I do think that there is some difficulty in how to balance and then who you partner with, because you want to make sure you're partnering with good things. But from the little bit that I saw with Illinois, they were really good about helping the players vet what was a good decision or a bad decision when it came to NIL. And so I don't think that a guy like Zach Edey is coming back to partner with just anyone and everyone. He has probably some big name companies he's backing or they're backing him to entice him to come back. And then let's not forget that he isn't someone who's coming back for a sixth season. It's only his fourth season, so it would make sense for him any year, even without NIL. It wouldn't be, in my opinion, a stretch for him to come back and play, especially given that he doesn't have the NBA stock of other players, who may have had the college success that he's had. So, that's always a factor. I mean, you can think of players throughout history. I mean, Tyler Hansborough would have made a ton of money in North Carolina, had he been able to access NIL. JJ Redick at Duke. Zion Williamson at Duke. My goodness, you think this is a lot of money for Zach Edey? So, again, I think that the programs who were already established, already big names, like the Purdues, like the IUs, like other programs around the country, it makes sense to lean into it and help them navigate that space, because it's not going anywhere. People who complain about it and the programs who are saying, oh, it's swaying things, it's not fair. I saw Nick Saban saying it's going to change the landscape of college football. And I'm like, wait a second. You're Alabama. You're going to get all the best players anyways. You're going to get paid a lot of money to go there still. So, in my opinion, the smart move is to lean into the money. Don't make it all you sell. But, you can't just be in the dark and act like it's not a big deal, because when you're talking to 17, 18-year-olds and you bring up money, I don't care how great they are or how responsible they are, that is going to grab your attention. It will grab mine for sure.
That's James Boyd. I am Jimmy Cook. Edey Garrison here with us as well on the Fan Midday Show. Got a nice show for you today. We're going to travel around, both previewing the NBA Finals as well as taking a look locally and nationally with the NFL offseasons. We begin that conversation, that journey, with a preview of Game 1 of the NBA Finals between the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. Michael Scotto going to join us of Hoops Height and USA Today Sports. Give us the rundown, what we need to expect as the NBA Finals begin this evening. And you get that right here at 8 o'clock here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. We'll have that coverage for you of Game 1 of the NBA Finals. Michael Scotto joins us when we return on the Fan Midday Show.
Still here in the DriveHubler.com studio alongside Jimmy Cook, Edey Garrison. I'm James Boyd here on 107.5 The Fan, Midday Show. Again, they haven't kicked me out yet, so I'm enjoying my time here. We have my guy, Michael Scotto, NBA writer, podcast host for Hoops Hype. He's been doing this for a long time. Probably didn't want me to say that, but he's a veteran in the game, knows a thing or two about a thing or two. So, Mike, how you doing?
What's up, bro? I'd like to think young OG or Uncle Mike, as some of the late 20-year-olds call him, even though I'm only going to be 34 in July. But I appreciate it, brother. It's good to talk with you. Happy for your success. What's going on, my man?
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I had a chance to, cross paths with Scotto when I was covering the Pacers. Met him in person at the NBA Summer League. I'm going to miss Vegas this year. My goodness. I'll be enjoying Westfield in Colts training camp. However, enough about that. I know with the NBA Finals coming up, everyone's got predictions and things like that, and I've been asking pretty much anyone we can get on, what can Miami do to somehow, some way, slay the dragon or slow down Nikola Jokic?
If they find the answer to that, I think the rest of the NBA would like to know. Because you know what it is, James. I mean, he does everything. He could shoot, rebound, pass, score. And the biggest thing about the Nuggets is the supporting cast around him is outstanding. It fits his strengths. They've got some shooting around him and defenders, and a guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Bruce Brown has been a great role player for them. Jamal Murray's a clutch and proven playoff performer. And Aaron Gordon, I think, is underrated. He's a guy that can guard pretty much any position in the NBA, and he's expanded his game offensively and is the perfect kind of glue guy for them. It seems like it's all coming together for them. And for Miami, with Jimmy Butler, a guy that makes no excuses, goes out playing on a hurt ankle, and is making the most of this season. Really, I think obviously, the X factor kind of matchup there is Bam Adebayo and Nikola Jokic. Bam has to slow him down. Bam is a guy that's an all defensive caliber guy, and you gotta prove that here, and do your best to slow him down. You're not going to stop him, but you got to try to slow him down, make it difficult, and bridge that gap. Because usually that's such a wide margin that Denver wins that center matchup against any other team. So we'll see if Miami can do it. And last but not least, some of their guys that have a chance to get paid this summer, and Max Strus and Gabe Vincent have shot the ball really well. And they're going to need that from them in the series.
Michael, when we look at what Miami's been able to do offensively during this run, particularly from beyond the arc, a lot of people were making a big deal after they got done with Milwaukee that, okay, well, their numbers are off the charts compared to what they were during the regular season. Eventually, that's going to level out, and they're going to fall back down to earth. And that really hasn't happened as drastically as some thought it would, particularly when you look at how they close things out against Boston. And I'm not saying that you can expect Caleb Martin to, average 26, 10, and 5 this series and be 60% from the field. But when you look at Miami from downtown versus how efficient Denver was both inside and outside in that Lakers series, is there any edge there for Miami? And if there's not, how much will they need to overachieve from beyond the arc to be able to hang with the Nuggets?
At a certain point, it just seems like they're at the roulette table in Vegas, and they keep betting red, and it hits. I just feel like at a certain point, they're getting good shots. They're getting good open looks throughout the playoffs. They did it against the Knicks as well. I saw it firsthand. Duncan Robinson has also kind of resurfaced a little bit. I know he missed a couple of shots at the end of games against Boston, but to me, I think Denver's going to play inside out through Jokic, and then the high post and kind of go from there. But with Miami, a lot of it is through pretty much Jimmy Butler, and they're going to Denver's going to key in on him, so other guys are going to get looks. It's just about knocking it down.
Michael, we talk a lot about, can a player be the best player on a championship team? I think Nikola Jokic can be that player. He could be closing in on that mark here soon in a couple weeks. But when you look at Jamal Murray, his career, the injuries he had to go through, the Bubble Murray nickname that he earned and then kind of shed by showing what he can do this postseason, what do you think a championship does for how we look at him in his career and just him as a player in this league?
I think, look, Jamal Murray's a guy that you think of a guy that overcame adversity, as you mentioned with the injury, but he's always been a proven clutch playoff performer, and we saw that against Donovan Mitchell when he was in Utah previously. I think, with the whole Nikola Jokic, being the best player, can he be the best player on a championship team? It's got a little bit of a reminiscence of maybe Dirk Nowitzki with the Mavericks. Until you hop the fence and you make that leap, there's always going to be those questions. But the guy's been an MVP. It's like, why not? Again, I think the biggest difference this year is the supporting cast around Denver and the continuity that they've built up in years past. You saw previously when they didn't have Jamal Murray, how they struggled a little bit with shot creation and clutch moments. I think they're a really good 1-2 duo. They work well together. And I think that being in Denver, they may not get as much publicity as, they should. And, Michael Malone, their coach, has kind of hinted at that when they played against the Lakers and how he felt the media coverage was. So I think it's a combination of all those things. And with Jamal, he's a guy that rises when the lights are brightest on the biggest stage. So, I expect that for him. And this is a guy that, many have been waiting to be an all-star caliber player in the regular season. But we know one thing, he definitely goes up like that caliber of a player in the playoffs.
Michael Scotto with us of Hoops Hype and USA Today here on the Fan Midday Show. Michael, for Miami and head coach Eric Spoelstra, obviously this is on board with his crowning achievement, if not one of the most incredible runs that we've seen throughout his tenure as a head coach, given the cast that he's working with now compared to the big 3 days. But a lot of that has been done on the defensive end. And we've seen multiple teams throughout this playoff run on Denver's side, whether it was throwing Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, KD, Devin Booker, Anthony Davis last series, try their best to figure out ways to slow down Nikola Jokic, and all of them have very rarely, if at all, tested the Nuggets on this run to the finals. With how dominant Miami can be from a defensive game plan standpoint, what's the best path to success for them? Is it trying to have a number of different looks or coverages to slow down Jokic, or is it keying on everybody else and letting the big man do what he's going to do, which is inevitably probably put up a 30 spot?
First of all, in Eric Spoelstra, I trust. I think that with Spo, he's going to mix in. I think he'll mix in the zone defense, which I don't think Jokic sees a ton, to maybe make it a little tougher for him in the paint. I think ideally you want Jokic shooting the ball more outside on the perimeter. Offensively, obviously he's going to pass and find cutters, but you want the other guys to beat you. It's going to be tough for them to stop both Murray and Jokic. You kind of have to pick your poison there. You can't exactly send double teams to all those guys because then everybody else is going to be open. So I think Spoelstra is going to mix coverages, go with the zone a little bit. We saw it in the Celtics series, how it stymied them offensively. Particularly, they forced Jaylen Brown to the left. So whatever weakness Nikola Jokic has, if any, Spoelstra's going through the film. Again, this is a guy. This is what I love about Spoelstra. Is a guy that came up in the video room, really grinded to get to the position that he's at. And I think if anybody's going to exploit a weakness in a player defensively, it's Spo. He's going to find it on film. So I look for them to kind of try to make this a grinded out series, slow it down a little bit, and mix those coverages against Jokic in particular.
So to pivot away from the NBA Finals to what's going on here in Indy, number 7 pick, Mike, what do you think, or who do you think are some players the Pacers should consider at that range that could help them? Because obviously, I think we know, at least down here watching the team from afar this past season, they've taken a step forward, but they're lacking some wings and some forwards, and you need wings and forwards in today's NBA.
Yeah, and I think I was waiting for this. This is your wheelhouse right here with Indy. So I would say you got to look at if Cam Whitmore falls. I think that's interesting there. Does one of the Thompson twins fall potentially? And then you got to look at. To me, I think if they go for a 4. I think you got to look at Jarace Walker. I think you got to look at Taylor Hendricks. And I think either one of those guys would be a wonderful compliment next to Miles Turner in the front court. You've got your backcourt in the future in Tyrese Halliburton and Benedict Mathurin. So to me, I think you're looking at a combination of Cam Whitmore, Jarace Walker, and Taylor Hendricks there at that spot. Any of those 3 would be a wonderful addition.
Michael, you go up and down the Eastern Conference and you look at the beat reporters or the fan sites, wherever you want to go, and you look at headlines or conversations around these NBA Finals, and has Denver and Miami revealed a blueprint or revealed a door where things can be learned for teams that maybe were outside looking in or teams that were in the middle of the pack within the Eastern Conference? And especially out west, even though it's like striking lightning in a bottle with where they got Jokic and what he turned into, is there this level of dream scenario parody that the NBA has been parodying for the last couple of years, or is this just an anomaly season where you have an 8 seed like Miami? That's not something you can bank on out of the play-in tournament every year, and we'll be back to the higher powers that be come next year.
Well, I think you look at parts of their success that are sustainable to me include the continuity of the team that they've been able to keep together is one thing. I think number 2, shrewd moves with the mid-level exception. Getting guys like Bruce Brown, Jeff Green over the years. Essentially they pillaged the Brooklyn Nets. But I don't know if that's going to be the success for everybody else in the league. But they've had to be shrewd and draft well. And they've done that. They've been able to find guys that they could flip and trade. They did that with Bones Highland previously. Previously it always was you draft well, you trade well if you were like a mid or small market team. And, you would supplement through free agency lastly. I think that's kind of what Denver's done here. And it's shown that blueprint is sustainable if you can do it. And Miami, again, they find these diamonds in the rough. They are excellent at player development, and you've seen that with all these. I can't tell you how many times on a broadcast, they'll remind you, hey, how how many guys they have that were undrafted? Hey, did you know that? Hey, I don't. In case you haven't heard this for like the 10th time. So, and I get it. I'm just joking, but it goes to show you that those are the keys to success for if you combine both of those teams, that's the blueprint. That's the outline for success for a small or mid-market team in the NBA.
Michael, when we look at the blueprint, I don't think anybody's had a better blueprint than Golden State. How much does Bob Myers not returning to them change the landscape over there and maybe the landscape of the league?
Well, I think that, but time is going to tell. But I think the biggest thing about Bob was a guy that was able to have a really good pulse and relationship with everybody and kind of steer them through some tough times. He had a great relationship with Draymond Green, which I think is extremely important for that team. Draymond's obviously a key part of their success. They're going to have to try to figure out what they're doing with his future. But when you look at the rest of the staff, they have a lot of continuity. Whether they go with anyone from Mike Dunleavy Jr. to Kirk Lacob, etc. They have plenty of continuity within the front office. Bob's still going to be there through right up until the start of free agency. So, he'll still be heavily involved. So I think he'll be able to help them make this segue and transition, and then ultimately, you go from there. I think you've got to really figure out. You're at like a needle moving point with some of those younger guys. They had already gotten rid of James Wiseman. What are you going to do with Moses Moody? What are you going to do with Jonathan Kuminga, who's looking for a bigger role? To me, that's the question for the regime shift going forward. Obviously, what they're going to do with Draymond Green's future, and you're also going to have to look at potentially extending Klay Thompson at a certain point as well. There's a lot of money coming up with the new CBA, so that they're going to have to manage. It's going to make it tougher for them to make moves, mid-level exception restrictions, trade restrictions. But Joe Lacob said, look, we're going to win no matter what. Well, it just got a lot harder without Bob and with the restrictions. So, I mean, they've certainly got the talent, but I'm looking forward to seeing how they adjust and how they pivot.
Yeah, I was going to ask and put you on the spot. Is the dynasty dead? Because everyone wants to count the Warriors out.
No. And I'm tired. Let me tell you something. I get tired of people like planning a funeral for these guys. Like Steph Curry is still playing at a high level.
Yes.
Klay Thompson, I know defensively, not the all-defensive player that, he was, but to me, Klay is still a really good player that a lot of teams would love to have. Draymond is still good defensively. Kevon Looney is an underrated glue guy for them. You never lose the championship DNA from those guys. Those guys are winners, and they find a way to maximize to the best of their abilities. I don't want to see that core as a fan of the NBA and just for what they've done. I would hate to see that core get broken up. Obviously they have to figure out, Draymond's future and eventually Klay and whatnot. But to me, that group, in a way, also again shows you when you draft well and you retain guys and you build around them and find pieces what can happen. So I don't think the dynasty is done. I think their success is even more remarkable and sustainable because, James, you have to go back to – I always go back to the Oklahoma City Thunder when they had Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook. People thought for a long time that they were going to run the NBA, and it was shorter. It lasted much shorter than people thought. And I just think that with injuries, and then you saw it with the Warriors when Durant and Klay Thompson went down. You can never take a season for granted. You got to maximize and squeeze the orange. You got to squeeze the pulp as much as you can. And I feel like the Warriors do that to the best of their ability every year. I don't think the dynasty is done, and I just think that they're going to have to make some strategic moves to better the team, better the supporting cast. When they won the title, I think people forget that guys like Otto Porter, guys like Gary Payton helped them, and they were on minimum deals. They have got to find guys on veteran minimum deals that are willing to come there to chase a ring, play with Curry, Thompson, Draymond, etc. That can be key contributors in the playoffs off the bench. I think that's as much been a part of their success. They found previously like an Andre Iguodala. I think that gets overlooked. Role players have a key importance in winning championships, and that's one of the reasons why the Denver Nuggets and Miami Heat are in the championship this year when you look at their roster makeup as well.
Michael, how much does Monty Williams making the payday that he got change coaching contracts? And we laughed at Detroit not getting Victor Wembanyama, but does that stabilize anything for them in terms of their young core bringing in Williams?
Well, I got to tell you, I think if you gave Troy Weaver a truth serum, he would take Victor Wembanyama over.
Yeah, sure. You and me both.
and in fact, if they got Victor Wembanyama, they probably would have got Monty Williams a lot easier. Would have had to break the bank. But I certainly will tell you that coaching agents, were salivating at this, like I am when Sunday sauce hits the table as an Italian. So I think, to me, then this is the game now that gets played, right? If Monty Williams is worth X, then
right.
Upcoming coach is worth Y. And the floor for salaries for coaches just rose dramatically. And, good for them, because I got to tell you, lately the trend had been, if you want a Coach of the Year award or you want a championship, you're out of here in like a couple of years. It was kind of a wild trend for a little bit. And so now maybe this stabilizes that. Respectfully, I don't know if Monty Williams stabilizes the Detroit Pistons. He's not exactly playing small forward out there, but he is a good coach that's going to maximize their their ceiling every year, in my opinion. And they needed a guy that's going to be a stabilizing force. I think for them, Monty has that opportunity, and we saw what he did in Phoenix, how he changed the culture there.
Well, Michael, thanks so much for your time, my man. Appreciate the insight, the humor, all of the above. And if I had to say so, I'd give you all the big bucks, my friend. You keep up the good work.
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. You could forward that for sure to my guys, but knock on wood, I'm pretty well off, and I'm thankful. So it's a blessing. But always good to chat with you. Enjoy the weekend, and should be a fun draft coming up here for the Pacers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Michael.
That was Michael Scotto, NBA writer, podcast host for Hoops Hype. You can follow him at Mike A. Scotto on Twitter. Funny guy, but he knows a lot of stuff, and he gave some good insight when it came to just how teams are built, I feel, with the way the NBA is kind of shaping up, with more parity than they've had, at least this season, they've had in years past.
This is a great conversation, and the most fascinating part of all of that is there's no salary cap for coaches. He's right. With X being Monty Williams' salary, what is Y going to be for when a deal for Eric Spoelstra or somebody else is up? It's going to all be very interesting to watch, see how that dynamic plays out over the coming years after Monty Williams signs that big contract with the Detroit Pistons. We're going to step aside. Went a little long there with Michael Scotto, but always good to get a full, flavorful take on both the NBA Finals and the NBA as a whole. Still to come, we'll get more reactions to Zach Edey coming back to Purdue, how it all came to be. Sam King going to join us from the Journal and Courier, covers the Purdue Boilermakers there as well as high school sports here on the Fan Midday Show. We ran along with Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype and USA Today. You can get our conversation on the Fan Midday Show podcast. Go to 1075thefan.com a little bit later this afternoon, or search the Fan Midday Show wherever you get your podcasts. When we return, a conversation with Sam King of the Journal and Courier, covers the Purdue Boilermakers. We'll get full reactions to Zach Edey's return, what it means for Purdue, the Big Ten, and that sweet, sweet matchup between IU and Purdue that everybody loves when they hoop it up twice a year, if it changes anything in that regard, if it's a revenge tour for Zach Edey. That conversation next with Sam King on The Fan.
Everyone's talking about Galaxy.
Jimmy Cook, James Boyd, Edey Garrison with nice tunes as always behind the ones and twos. Big day for Purdue fans across the country, especially up in West Lafayette, as Zach Edey, National Player of the Year, decides to come back, give it one more go-round with Matt Painter and company. Our next guest was on this beat throughout that process and reacted and covered to it last night with the Lafayette Journal and Courier. It's Sam King. Sam, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing a lot better now that I don't have to refresh my computer about it in 50 seconds.
I'm glad to hear that, Sam. I'm glad to hear that it wasn't just fans and talk radio hosts alike. It was also those on the beat continually using those thumbs as much as possible to get Twitter refreshed.
Well, I set up an alert on Zach's Instagram and his Twitter account, so eventually I just submitted, and I was like, this isn't going to happen until late, and fortunately I was smart to do that, and as soon as he put it on Twitter, I was able to see it.
We discussed yesterday our predictions of what we thought was going to happen, and while we weren't going out on a limb with this, most of us felt like Zach Edey was going to come back. I felt like throughout this whole process that if the NIL money was strong enough and the desire to finish up at Purdue was strong enough, he would likely head back. Was it close at all in this process? We know he shined out and showed off a bit within the combine, but was this ever a real close decision?
I really thought he was coming back all along. That's not any inside knowledge. That's just kind of my beliefs when you see that he was, a second-round pick. Some people had him, as low as the 60th pick in the draft, which if you get in that territory, you're in danger of not getting picked at all. I don't know if a few years ago this would have happened, but NIL has done wonders for college basketball and bringing these players back, where in the past some of those guys would just take the risk knowing that somehow you're going to get paid, whether it's overseas or you're in the developmental league or whatever it is, versus going to college, going to class, not getting anything out of it. But he's going to make a lot of money and do so while still being a college basketball player, which is great for the college game.
Sam, I find it hilarious that you had to turn on the post notifications, because I don't know if anyone could have predicted that journalism would look how it does today, where we have to be on our phones so much, and that's where most of the news comes from. But now that you've done that, he's coming back. How does Zach Edey change the landscape for not only Purdue, not only the Big Ten, but for the country?
Yeah, I think that Purdue would have been fine even if Zach Edey had stayed in the draft. With him coming back, clearly much better. That boosts the whole roster, and I think now when you start looking at projections, Purdue's a preseason top 5 team, and I think that when I started looking at this team a year ago, I thought last year maybe was a lot of overachieving. Purdue had a great non-conference, beat some big teams, and vaulted from unranked to the top of the poll in a matter of basically a few weeks. So maybe got ahead of themselves there and down the stretch did not play as well as it had earlier in the season. But now you've got all these expectations. Your freshman guards are seasoned. You've got more continuity working together and things like that. And I think that Purdue probably is now the favorite to win the Big Ten, or right there with Michigan State, and is a team that should be discussed as a Final Four team. Now, there's a lot of scenarios and things that can happen before now in March, but at least in the early discussion, I think Purdue's right there with the Kansases of the world and teams like that.
If this is a healthy roster come the start of the college basketball season, to that end, whose shoulders bear the most weight for Purdue ending the drought since 1980 of hanging a Final Four banner? Is it Matt Painter? Is it Zach Edey with his return now? Is it the expectations for a leap forward from Lawyer and Smith? Who wears the most weight with where these expectations are at arguably an all-time high for Purdue basketball?
Yeah, I will not be surprised, and it's probably very likely that Zach Edey's stats are not what they were a year ago. He was so much of what Purdue did, and they relied on him quite a bit. I think Braden Smith, now being a sophomore point guard, starting for a whole season, and showing that he's capable of being a scorer, he just kind of at times stepped away from that role and became more of a facilitator and things like that. I think he's going to have a big year where he's averaging 10 to 15 points a game, I think Purdue will probably have to do some different things offensively. It's not just going to have Zach come down, post up in the paint, and drop the ball off to him and hope he makes a play or execute a pick and roll and lob it up to a guy who's 7'4" and is going to jump over the top of somebody and dunk it. We knew, those of us who are around Purdue basketball, that he can shoot. He's not some big ogre that stands in the lane and has no footwork or speed or anything like that. And I think that was the biggest thing Zach knew about himself, but had to prove to NBA scouts when he went to the combine. And then people saw what a lot of us knew was that, he's not just some stiff that can't play any other way but back to the basket. But now does Purdue utilize that? Does Zach become somebody who can step out and hit an elbow jumper or can extend the offense and open the lane for other people? What Purdue will have is two guys that nobody's talking about right now that the team did not have last year, and that's Miles Colvin, who's an incoming freshman, and Cam Edey, who redshirted last year. They are the type of athletes that can get to the basket, create for themselves, elevate over people, and probably throw down some highlight dunks that the team that this year just didn't have that type of a player, and probably what the team needed at times, because the shooting was really good for stretches, but down the end of the season just missed three-pointers, and Purdue relied on having a 7'4" guy in the paint and that opening up the outside shots for players. Kind of lived and died by the three there at the end of the season, and when they weren't falling, Purdue looked like a totally different team. So to answer your question in short, I think it's Braden Smith's going to have to step up and be more of a scorer while also doing a lot of the things that made him successful last year. But then these two incoming freshmen, Edey and Colvin, are going to have to be guys that make Purdue's offense look a little bit different than it did a year ago.
Well, Sam, I truly believe that Zach Edey, even as a National Player of the Year, is a bit underrated because of the talks about the NBA and things like that. He's still one of the best players in the sport when it comes to the college level. And he might be a little undersized. I know he was listed at 7'4" on the official roster, 7'3" at the combine. So, undersized Zach Edey, I'll say that too as a joke. But in all seriousness, when you look at what it means for this state in particular, how much juice do you think it adds for him to come back and have another crack at IU? Because we know no matter who's on either roster in a year, it's always going to be the game that this state circles. And then obviously I feel like there's going to be a brighter circle around this year's matchups because of his return.
Yeah, and to your first point, for somebody who has to video interviews with Zach Edey, and my arms go numb from holding the camera as high above my head as I can, he's definitely not undersized. But, yeah, I think that the main thing that Zach Edey had in coming back was team success. He's accomplished everything individually you can do in college basketball, and it really is about the team. And that was kind of his mantra all year. Whenever you would ask him about personal achievements, it was always about the team, and he's a team-first guy. And I think he wants to help Purdue, beat the rival. That was very disheartening. The game at Bloomington last year was frustrating because it was just really one bad half that Purdue had, and outplayed Indiana for most of the second half and just made a mistake late. But then to come back at Mackey Arena, where Purdue almost never loses, and have Jalen Hood-Schifino just cook them, absolutely cook them. And that was kind of embarrassing to get swept by your rival when you dominated that series in recent years. So that probably is a big thing when it gets to the point where they play each other next year. Is like, hey, we owe those guys one now because they got us twice last year. And then on top of that, it is, I hate to say Final Four or bust, because there's so many things that have to happen to get through a one and done tournament. But you kind of get the feel like, hey, I came back to do something that this program hasn't done for over 40 years now.
Yeah, as the IU grad in the room, that was tough to see. I agree. Twice last year. Sam King joined us here at the Lafayette Journal and Courier, covers the Purdue Boilermakers, does a great job and nice enough to take some time with us here on the Fan Midday Show. Sam, every college fan base in the age of NIL gets worried or fearful that they're going to be left behind, that perhaps their coaching staff or their alumni base will not be quite as forward-thinking as other programs have been about utilizing NIL and not being, like I said, left behind in the Stone Age. Does this move of retaining Zach Edey and I know we'll never know the official figure, but does this move lay to rest any fears or worries that Purdue would get left behind in the NIL age?
I think that although I think Purdue was late to the party in trying to set up a plan for how to get its student athletes paid, Purdue does have a solid thing in place now with athletic director Mike Lipinski made it a big point of emphasis. I think a couple of years ago, brought all the coaches in for a meeting and said, hey, we got to come up with some ideas here on how we can do this, or we're going to miss out on some athletes that we would normally get. So I think, and Zach's in a different boat by himself because of what he's accomplished and who he is. They can sell hockey jerseys. They could probably sell soccer jerseys or whatever they wanted to with his name on the back and make him a lot of money. But I think that, you see more and more, and it's probably this way everywhere, but I'm around Purdue's program, so I see it. Just T-shirts of players that maybe even aren't star players, but the NIL is set up where you can get any kind of T-shirt with Purdue on the front and a name and number on the back and things like that. And then I've seen more and more of these athletes getting out and doing youth camps in the summer, shooting camps. Mason Gillis totally capitalizing on hitting 9 threes against Penn State last year, is now hosting shooting camps. And you can put by that Purdue's, single game 3-point record holder, and that maybe holds some weight, and people think, okay, that guy knows how to shoot. I should go to this camp. But yeah, I think that Purdue's got some things in place where these athletes can capitalize on their name and image and likeness, I guess, what NIL stands for.
To, I guess, add to that, the thing about Zach Edey that made it unique with him coming back, at least in my eyes, was that he wasn't using a fifth year, COVID year. He wasn't a sixth year. He wasn't a post-grad. He's a senior, a regular senior. So do you think this could be his last ride, or is there a possibility that, he'll just go through this process again next year and kind of see where he's at, and if he wants to use that COVID year to run it back again?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of things are probably going to play into that. Does Purdue have another disappointing end of the season? Does Zach go through I think he goes through the process again no matter what. But you do that to get the feedback about where you think you'll land in the draft, how much money you'll make. Potentially our team's telling you, hey, we've got a spot for you or a plan for you. There's a lot of things. And even though most of us assumed that Zach Edey was coming back, I wholeheartedly believe that he was kind of waiting until the last minute to see who withdrew their name from the draft and decided to go back to school and whatnot, because he was, one of the last guys who decided last night. It was after 9 p.m. and that's getting down to the final 2+ hours before he had to make a decision. So, he could. And the thing people don't know about Zach, or some people might, is he reclassified. So he's actually a year younger than his college status. He could have been in high school for another year, and he just decided that it was time for him to move on from IMG Academy, where he basically played basketball for 2 years, and that was the only basketball background he had when he came to Purdue. And then from there, it's been all about the work ethic and desire to get better and improve at a lot of things, and clearly he's done that. But I think it's going to come down to probably this same scenario last year. Like, do I think I can come back and win a national championship? Or because I don't think Zach Edey's probably going to be the national player of the year again. He'll be, a dynamic rebounder. He'll be able to score and do some things, but he's not going to be the guy that he was this year. And that's probably to the benefit of Purdue, which it can do some different things and force defenses to not just kind of go through a week of practice knowing how we're going to set up and defend that team.
You touched on it a bit there. I'm looking at Zach Edey's bio on Purdue's website. Last season, he became the third high major player, joining Michael Beasley, Kevin Durant, to rank top 10 in the NCAA in both scoring and rebounds in the last 20 years. And so you touched on a little bit there as far as his development, but can you speak a little bit more about just how far he's come as a basketball player, considering this is not a lifelong endeavor that he's been on like most players that are at his level now?
Yeah, and Matt Painter said this several times last year. Because he had such little basketball experience, he never really picked up any bad habits or anything like that. It was all everything that he was learning and soaking in and working on to get better. And he takes criticism, which some players don't. Some players don't want to hear the negatives, but he takes that and uses it to say, okay, I need to get better at this. And, he's a 70+% free throw shooter, which is uncharacteristic for someone who's, I guess, 7'3" and a quarter officially, if you go by the combine measurements. And he can shoot. That's not what Purdue needed him to do last year. But yeah, I kind of forget what your question was.
No, just the development of him and just seeing how it's kind of manifested over the last few years.
Yeah, people didn't think he was going to be able to play 30-plus minutes a game last year, I don't think, because he had been a guy that split time with Travion Williams as a freshman and sophomore, and, at times would come in and pick up 2 or 3 quick fouls and come right back out of the game. And that's maybe the biggest area where Purdue couldn't afford to have him out of games for, 15 minutes of a half last year. And he really did a great job at not fouling people at times, and some of that's how the game's officiated. And he also kind of embraced what he is, maybe from his hockey background growing up. He was getting, punched, kicked, kneed in the backside throughout the course of the season. And you can plead with the referees all you want, but there's not going to be a lot of feeling sorry for a guy that's that big when he's got scratches and bruises all over him, because he's definitely given as much as he's receiving as far as punishment goes.
Sam King covers Purdue for the Lafayette Journal and Courier. Here with us on the Fan Midday Show. How much for Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, as they have another year under their belts, how much of their growth and development is centered around confidence and in a large part being able to take that workload off of Zach Edey, as Matt Painter kind of alluded to a number of times throughout the season, particularly after losses last year?
Yeah, I don't think that either one of those guys lack confidence. Even when Fletcher Lawyer was in a route where he was shooting like 2 of 20 from 3 or something, I asked him at a practice, and he said, no, next game I'll go out and knock 5 or 6 down and be fine. But I think the biggest thing is they've gone through that freshman season, and when you're going through a high school schedule, you play 20 to 25 games, depending how far you go in the state tournament. When you go to college, you play that schedule, and there's still 10 games before you get to the postseason. So that's, really having to adapt, because by the time you're through it, you're almost like playing half of an NBA schedule. And when you play in the Big Ten, which is a league that allows you to be physical and, kind of lower scoring games, and it's maybe a little bit more brutal, as you can see when you get in the NCAA tournament and see how some of these other major programs play and how they design their offense. I think that even though the players won't say this, and I don't think the coaches will say it, those two guys did at one point hit a wall where it was like, man, this is usually the end of my season, and I'm gearing up to go to AAU, which is a completely different animal than organized basketball at the college or high school level. And I think it wore on them a bit. So I think that's, why the production was down from those two. Now, having gone through it, you hope that those guys are, able to get to that wall and just kind of break through it versus having some off games where you need them to step up and score and they're just not making it happen.
Sam, you've been there to document this, witness this, but how have you seen Matt Painter sort of shoulder the expectations that come along with building this program to the point where they're considered one of the best in the country, but not being able to get over that hump in the postseason? How have you seen him kind of navigate that and maybe internalize it going into another season where obviously the expectations are very high? Yeah,
if you look at Tony Bennett's career at Virginia, it is basically Matt Painter's to a T, except for one game where the two played each other, and Virginia hits a last-second shot and ends up going to the Final Four and winning the national championship, and Purdue goes home in the Elite Eight. So I think that's something where you can look at and say, at some point, you just have to get lucky, and Purdue hasn't had the breaks go its way at times. When you look overall at Matt Painter's success, he's won a ton of games. He's been to Sweet 16s, Elite Eights, won Big Ten titles, National Coach of the Year, basically everything there is to have on the resume. And the knock on him is always he hasn't been to a Final Four. He hasn't won a national championship. So Gene Katie was before him in the same boat where people are like, he's not that great a coach because he never got to the Final Four. Matt Painter is a basketball mastermind, I believe, and he's also very truthful, and he'll tell you straight up that he got out-coached in the NCAA tournament and he doesn't shy away from it. But you say that enough, and fans start to say, why do you keep getting out coached when we're paying you X million amount of dollars? We need a better coach. And sitting in Columbus for that first round game against Fairleigh Dickinson, the reporter next to me actually did turn and say, "Is this a fireable offense for Matt Painter to get beat by a 16?" And I said, absolutely not. I think a lot of fans felt he should have been fired. There was kind of no in between. You either wanted him gone or not. But I never felt that his job was in jeopardy because, like I said, I don't think last year's team was projected to be 29-6, the number one seed in the NCAA tournament. That was something I thought maybe more would be what this season looked like. And you do that a year ahead of schedule and then bring basically everyone back but David Jenkins, who was a contributor on that team, and add some more weapons. I think that, now you go into the season with those expectations, and at the end of the year, if you don't accomplish things, then maybe there's more room to criticize what happened. But, Matt Painter is very aware of what his reputation is, and he's not going to hide from it. But at the same time, he's just going to keep doing his job and waiting for that moment where Purdue hopefully does break through.
He's Sam King, covers Purdue Boilermakers action for the Lafayette Journal and Courier. Joins us here on the Fan Midday Show. Sam, appreciate your work. And while I won't ask you to reveal your screen time over the last couple of weeks, hopefully it gets a little bit lower for you and able to not have to glue yourself to the laptop or the screen as often, knowing Zach Edey's coming back.
Yeah, that's going to be very helpful. But thank you, guys. I appreciate being on.
Thanks, Sam. That's Sam King, and you can follow him on Twitter at Samuel T. King, covers Purdue for the Lafayette Journal and Courier. The only thing in terms of our conversation that I maybe disagree with him a little bit on, or maybe I didn't phrase the question properly, there's no doubt in terms of, from a volume shooting perspective, that the likes of Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith lacked confidence. But if you have ever wanted to see what it looks like to see a team scared and crumble within itself down the stretch of a high-pressure cooker situation, it's the second half of that game against Fairleigh Dickinson. That's more or less what I'm talking about. Is, do I think that's probably an anomaly? Yes. I mean, I think that that's something that you can recover from, and everybody talks about, we joked about it when the Pacers were looking for potentially a play-in spot. Oh, get that NCAA tournament experience. I mean, is that ideal to have that kind of loss right under your belt out of the gate? No, but very young players, very raw players in that regard, and there's an opportunity for growth there. But that being said, that wasn't just a one-game thing. That was the worst it was all year, but there were moments where you could not rely on others around Zach Edey to bridge the gap towards a successful campaign, and we really need to figure some things out, whether it's driving to the basket, whether it's opening things up for Zach, whether it's knockdown shooters being able to step up in the right moment. I'm not saying Purdue shouldn't be in the top 5, but if that doesn't fix itself, which again, I think it will, it's hard for me to really look at this team and see that much different if they're not able to straighten that out, which again, I think they will do, but that's something that has to be on your mind if you're Matt Painter and if you're a Purdue fan. What's different about this year other than Zach Edey's back and we were able to fill a few holes or add a couple more pieces between the transfer portal and the recruiting trail? Yeah,
you make a good point. They were shook in that game.
Oh, my goodness.
I watched it. And there were some shots that they didn't take, and you're like, wow, you're not going to shoot now. And so I understand where Sam's coming from. You only can go based off what the player is telling you.
Right.
And, of course, no player is going to ever say they lost confidence. At least the great ones don't. But there was a clear disconnect in that game because I remember watching it and thinking, oh, my goodness, they've been punched in the mouth, and they can't get up. They can't get up off the canvas. And so, we'll see if things change this year. I do think experiences has a lot to do with that confidence and how you react in certain situations. However, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get back in those moments and have the opportunity to be a 1 seed again and obviously have an easier path to the Final Four. But, like I've been saying all morning, all afternoon, Zach Edey is back. They can rejoice in West Lafayette for now. And then, like I said, in addition to that, I just can't wait for the IU-Purdue matchup because the pettiness in me wants to see this happen whichever way it goes because, for example, if Purdue wins, the game or sweeps is going to be, we whooped you guys, and IU fans are going to say, hey, last season we got you guys. But then if IU has their number again, Purdue fans are going to turn around and say, oh, we made it. We won the Big Ten championship. No one cares. It's always about that specific moment and how petty you can be in that moment. And so I can't wait.
We got to go to break, but I know what you're doing. And you can get in his mentions at Romeoville Kid. I know what's happening here. You're just trying to use the IU-Purdue rivalry as a meat shield because you don't want either one of those fan bases in your mention when Illinois takes
bring the
floor.
smoke. Bring the smoke. No, I'm with all that. I love it. I enjoy the banter. As long as people know it's banter, don't come to my mentions cussing me out, please. But I enjoy people telling me to eat it.
People.
Yeah, when my team kind of stinks it up. There's a reason why we're not talking about Illinois because they're not in the thick of this thing like the other two programs are.
We'll head back between the lines this time to the gridiron. Cameron Wolfe, national NFL reporter for NFL Network, going to join us. We'll get more perspective on the Colts as they try to have a blueprint for their own right of how this rebuild is working along with Anthony Richardson, and take a trip around the NFL nationally where those big storylines are with the offseason in terms of signings and stuff essentially complete, but training camp, OTAs, ongoing and on the horizon, respectively. That'll be with Cameron Wolfe, the NFL Network. When we return, it's the Fan Midday Show.
50 years. The Fan.
Still here vibing out in the drophuler.com studio. Jimmy Cook, Eddie Garrison, I'm James Boyd. 107.5 you're tuning into. We've had NBA, we've had Zach Edey talk. Now we're moving over to the NFL with Cameron Wolfe, covers the NFL for NFL Network. I met Cam last summer when Matt Ryan was the QB1 here in Indianapolis.
What a time.
The talk was about potential playoff run, outside of the Super Bowl. Obviously, Cam, things have changed. So before I get into that, how are you doing now that the landscape has changed around Indy and the league as well?
Man, I'm doing great, man. I'm excited about this year. I think what's cool for Indy and really the entire AFC South is you sort of have new blood for that quarterback position with 3 rookies getting drafted this year. And so this is probably the most excited I've been about the division as a whole in a long time. And, for Indy, as you guys know and your fan base knows, they've been on this sort of train of find the veteran quarterback that will keep us afloat. And, whether you loved Anthony Richardson or not, now you get a guy you can invest in and really see grow, and ideally is your future for the next 10, 15 years. So I think it's an exciting time for Colts fans.
Yeah, I think so as well. There's obviously a lot of hype around Anthony Richardson in particular. And from your perspective, what has it been like to see someone like him who, on one hand, you're like, oh my goodness, the stuff he can do is unbelievable. But on the other hand, it's like he wasn't a great college player. So how do you assess where he was drafted and what the future may hold for him if things click here in Indy with Shane Steichen?
Yeah, no, Anthony Richardson to me was the most interesting player in this draft. And, luckily I got the chance to spend some time with him this offseason. He and his team invited me out to Jacksonville in March. And so I got to know him a little bit better personally, met his family and met a lot of the people around him. And you get to see why everybody raves about him. I know on the surface you look at it and you say he had a 54% completion rate. He went, 6-6 at Florida. How can this guy lead our franchise? But then if you get to meet him, you get to know a lot of the ins and outs of his game. Then you get to see what that potential could be in an offense that Shane Steichen is running. So, to me, Anthony Richardson is the quarterback that had more upside than any other player. And as I started to talk to GMs and executives throughout the process, they told me just how much Anthony Richardson's this was maybe overblown. And that if you put him in an offense that sort of insinuates his skill set, get him in a skill set of receivers that fit around him, then he could be a guy that becomes a big-time playmaker a lot quicker than people expect.
Cameron Wolfe, NFL Network, joining us here on the Fan Midday Show. Cameron, we always talk about the advantage of having a rookie contract under your belt as a franchise and being able to really not focus on that position from a dollars and cents standpoint, but focus on other areas to try to maybe even squeak in and capture a championship during that rookie contract window. A fan favorite here and one of the most dominant players when he's healthy in the National Football League is Jonathan Taylor. He's obviously entering a contract year. How much of a bounce-back season for him will factor into that? And with the at least modern adage of running backs can be a dime a dozen, never give them a big, massive payday. He's only 24. Is there still a window there for the Colts to not be hampering themselves long-term if they were to eventually pay him big money?
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it on the nail. Like this era of running backs, it seems like very few are trying to get paid. Teams are trying to pay them at high-end salary. And the ones that do are typically the Christian McCaffreys that, can receive 1,000 yards and rush for 1,000 yards at the same time. So, if we follow the track of a lot of these other running backs, there's probably a decent chance that they say, hey, Jonathan Taylor will make you play out your fifth-year option, and we're not going to give you that big contract yet. And so if that's the case, then maybe that extends their window of having to pay a running back for a bit. But to me, I think Jonathan Taylor's probably maybe the biggest beneficiary for Anthony Richardson landing here, because you get a quarterback who obviously is going to be a dynamic playmaker in the run game. That opens up lanes for Jonathan Taylor in the read option game and the RPO game that he just didn't have with Matt Ryan. And so I anticipate Jonathan Taylor bouncing back to be a top 3, top 5 running back that he is this year. And eventually he'll get his money, even if it isn't immediately after the season.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, Cam, when you look at where Anthony Richardson is, pretty raw prospect, hasn't played a lot as far as starts since high school. How much do you think Jonathan Taylor can help him maybe get ready faster, considering that defenses still have to account for a guy who 2 years ago was, the rushing champ?
No, I think he should help a lot, really, this whole offense, because if you look a little deeper into what Anthony Richardson did at Florida, he had a freshman running back and Trevor Etienne, actually Travis's little brother, but he's a freshman, right? They had nobody on their offense that was, drafted in the top 3 rounds other than their guard, Osiris Torrance. None of those receivers are projected first-round picks, and so he'll immediately come in Indy and have a better talent base, not even close than what he had in Florida. And so that should help tremendously. The other token of that is you have somebody in the backfield that can help you navigate what rookies often face, which is the all-out blitzes or the confusing schemes. You got someone in Jonathan Taylor that can point out, okay, this is what it means when that Mike linebacker is flashing there, or when a safety's coming back and showing blitz. And so Anthony Richardson is very smart. I've seen him in the film room, and he only really needs to learn things once or twice before he gets it. But if you got a backfield mate that can help you out, maybe that helps your learning curve a bit.
Cameron, where do you stand on, and there's no real right or wrong path to this, right? It's all situational, but where do you stand on the start versus sit a rookie out of the gate camp?
Oh, for Anthony Richardson, I'm absolutely starting him week 1 and not looking back. I think that the big thing for him is, all the knocks against him was that he started 12, 13 games in college. And so why wouldn't I want to see him get those reps, get that experience early on, even if there's some growing pains? Just the reality is Gardner Minshew is not going to be your future. And I'm not even sure year 1 if Gardner Minshew gives you a better chance to win. And so I want to see Anthony Richardson grow. I want to see him get some reps. I want to see how he responds to different defensive coverages. And I think he's going to surprise some people in his ability. You think about just quarterbacks that had, I don't want to say comparable skill sets, but had the quote-unquote, okay, they're run-first guys with maybe not the accuracy coming out of college like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. Both of those guys were able to survive in year one with low accuracy percentages, and then they got better through reps. And then year two and year three, with continuity in the system, we saw them develop into the passers they are now. And so I think you could hope for Anthony Richardson to have that same trajectory, but that doesn't start until you play him on the field. So I'm playing him week one, and I'm not taking him off the field unless he's hurt.
Whether he starts week one or not, and again, Indy fans probably loved that you said that because that's all they ever say in my mentions. And I'm like, hey, I'm not making that decision. But how much of an asset is Gardner Minshew in that quarterback room, considering his experience with Shane Steichen and just how self-aware he is as a player and being a pretty good one when he's been given chances in the league?
Yeah, no, Gardner Minshew's done it all, right? He's been a starter. He's been a backup. He's a guy who's probably exceeded what he was expected to in the league, being a late-round draft pick. Obviously knows the game, and I'm not sure how many Colts fans are aware of this, but they already have a really good relationship. They train together down in Jacksonville. I actually spent like 3 days with both of them when I was there in March, and so I saw Gardner Minshew working out with Anthony Richardson. They would take turns through passing drills, and Gardner would show Anthony something, and Anthony might show Gardner something, and so they feed off each other, all of their different skill sets. And so I don't think there'll be any animosity in that quarterback room. I think it'll actually be the opposite. And so even if Gardner gets that day one starting job, I think that it's only growth that Anthony can get from a guy like him. Whereas you're in a different situation. If a Matt Ryan's there, you may have a little bit more of an adversarial relationship because that guy is still trying to protect his starting job, and maybe he's a little bit less apt to be that mentor that I think Gardner will be.
Cameron Wolfe covers the NFL nationally for NFL Network with us here on the Fan Midday Show. I want to jump to a team that is a couple steps ahead of where the Colts want to be, and in a different division, in fact, in the AFC East, and the Miami Dolphins. When you look at what they did this offseason and where they want to go in that competitive AFC East, where is the biggest where's the biggest impact point for them? Is it the addition of Vic Fangio and Jalen Ramsey, or is it the health of Tua?
Yeah, I think yes is the answer, both of them on both sides of the ball. I think the biggest question by far surrounding this team is, can the quarterback stay healthy? You look at people who doubt the Dolphins, that's the point they'll point to. They'll say that Tua's one concussion away from his career being threatened. How can you trust that guy being your starter? And they have some valid points there. You know, we had multiple concussions last year, missed 5 games. But the supporters will point to the point that they were a top 5 offense when he was healthy. The fact that they have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on the roster makes them maybe the most explosive offense in football. And so I see both sides of it. The reality is for the Dolphins is Tua's got to stay healthy. The offensive line's got to protect him. He's got to find a way not to get those injuries for this season to matter at all. But the biggest difference maker this offseason was Vic Fangio and Jalen Ramsey coming into this building. As quiet as it's kept, the Dolphins had one of the worst defenses of football last year after the previous years being pretty solid in that area. And so they go away from that blitz-happy scheme that they ran in the Brian Flores and Josh Boyer era, and now they run a lot more zone scheme. Jalen Ramsey should help out Xavier Howard on the other side. And I think this team can go mano-a-mano with the Bills and the Jets and possibly win this division if their quarterback can stay healthy. I think they're that good.
So to pivot to another AFC East team, the Buffalo Bills, Damar Hamlin was obviously one of the biggest stories in the league last season because of the unique injury or incident that happened. Down here in Indy, Rodney Thomas is one of his best friends growing up. You know, they've known each other for a long time. You were covering the Damar Hamlin situation a lot. From a personal standpoint, I guess taking the reporter hat off for a moment, how gratifying is it to see someone go through that and having to cover that and seeing him come out on the other side now where he's announced he's going to try to make his return to the NFL?
Yeah, no, James, that great question. That was probably the most impactful story I've ever covered in my career, and may be the biggest one I cover in my career. You know, just given the fear that a lot of us had at that situation. You know, I'm human as well. You know, my job was to be the chronicle or the reporter in that situation, but you weren't sure how he was going to come out from that perspective, and not just from a football perspective, from a health, from a quality of life perspective. And he is seemingly a God-performed miracle that he came out and now he's back to playing football. And I think that, everybody who was touched by that situation, I think came out and grew from it. You mentioned Rodney. I remember talking to his family members who were telling me about Rodney coming to visit and telling me about some of his other teammates and the impact that had on his growth. And so that's something they'll remember forever. DeMar will remember forever. And so I think that day for all of us who were there or were impacted with this will never leave us. And as we see him kind of come closer to football, I think it's kind of a reminder of how precious this sport is that we love and how precious life is as well.
Cameron Wolfe of NFL Network joins us on the Fan Midday Show. Cameron, as you look at the remaining avenues for free agents this offseason, or newly minted free agents, I should say, since he just got put on the ability to sign with another team back on Monday, where is the best fit, both from a money standpoint, assuming that matters to him, as well as a fit offensively for DeAndre Hopkins at this stage of his career?
Yeah, at this stage, he's got to go to a place where he's got a quarterback that he can trust. And obviously he wants the money that qualifies for that too, which is often hard to get both, right? So the teams that we've heard most commonly connected with them, the Chiefs and the Bills, are both money tight. And so you got to figure, does he want to go to one of the two better quarterbacks in the league, or is he willing to take less to go to a place like Houston where he's had some success before, but maybe not as ready to win as the Chiefs or the Bills? Does he go to a place like Tennessee, which needs a receiver, but also may not be as ready to win at this stage? Does he go to another money-type place like Baltimore? I think ultimately DeAndre Hopkins is going to determine what he prefers more. Does he value great quarterback play and the opportunity to win, or does he value money? Because I don't know if there's going to be a perfect marriage where you can get that big bag but also get a chance to play with an elite quarterback who has a chance to win a ring.
So, Cam, I guess keeping it in the AFC East, because they're pretty intriguing this time of year for whatever reason. Looking at Aaron Rodgers, he hasn't been able to practice the last few days. Is it concerning at all he's not been available, considering that he is joining a new franchise with new players and he has to build that chemistry? Or are you in the camp of, hey, it's not that big of a deal as long as he's ready by training camp?
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. I don't remember the last time Aaron Rodgers participated in OTAs. It might have been 10 years ago. He's just not an OTA guy. I think he probably just went to Jets OTAs because of the appearance of it. He doesn't want to show up to a new team and not show up for camp. I'm usually of a believer that OTAs don't have a ton of value for most veterans, but if you're running a new scheme, there probably is some value. I think the one thing it does remind us, as good as Aaron Rodgers is, he's still 40 or almost 40 years old. And so those guys tend to break down a little bit easier. They tend to have a little bit more brittle bones, so to speak, as an old man. And so, we got kind of spoiled with Tom Brady seeing him play to 45. That's not really the norm. And so I think the fact that he's having a calf injury this early is not necessarily a worrisome thing for the Jets, as much as a reminder that he's really year to year. And at any point, we could see sort of the fall off of Aaron Rodgers. But right now, they're just hoping they catch lightning in the bottle for the next year or two and try to steal some wins, some playoff bursts, and maybe even more.
Cameron, last thing on my end, it was a very weird 12 to 24 months surrounding Orlando Brown Jr. and what his future was going to be in terms of which team he would end up with. Kansas City had made him a relatively rich offer that he wanted to bet on himself for another year. He ends up with less than what was initially offered to him to go to Cincinnati. So it's kind of a two-part question. What went into him ending up with the Bengals? And then with Joe Burrow, they're always going to be in contention. Where is the outlook for Cincinnati as they try to get back to the Super Bowl and ultimately win the thing next year?
Yeah, good question. As far as Orlando Brown Jr., my understanding is he was really adamant on playing left tackle. And he also was valued a little bit differently than maybe he initially thought as far as his market. I think he thought that he was going to be able to, get $20+ million, and ultimately it did not happen that way. And sometimes that happens at free agency where you may overvalue yourself a little bit. You have a little bit of more stringent requirements, and then a team moves on. You have to make these decisions quickly. And so, the Chiefs moved on and went for a Jawan Taylor, and they ultimately didn't have the money to go for Orlando Brown again. And so I think that's what led him to Cincinnati. I also do think it's a good fit. Joe Burrow's been dying to have reliable offensive tackles. And I think Orlando Brown, when he's in shape, when he's healthy, is a very reliable tackle for them. And so I think that, he could have been in worse places. But I'm very eager to see how it impacts the Chiefs. They went out there and they signed Jawan Taylor. I think he's going to end up playing right tackle now that they signed another left tackle. But Patrick Mahomes needs that protection as well. And so that's going to be one to follow throughout the year, which of those tackles end up being better for their teams, Jawan Taylor or Orlando Brown. And, as far as the Bengals, I think that they have been one or two plays away the last 2 or 3 years. And, maybe Orlando Brown's that piece. Maybe it's some guys they got in the draft. But I think there's no reason to think that, hey, either a combination of Burrow, Mahomes, and Allen aren't in the AFC Championship once again. And so 2 of those 3, that's just been the flow in the AFC.
Cam, really appreciate your time. I look forward to potentially seeing you in Indy. I know there's going to be somebody making their way down to see the kid from Florida and what he's capable of on the field. But you continue the great work. Keep rising, my man. And thanks again for all you kind of gave me when I first joined the NFL world.
Absolutely. No, appreciate you, James. Appreciate y'all. Always looking forward to seeing you guys in Indy. I'm sure I'll make my way there at some point, and we'll chop it up and have a good time.
Sounds good. That was Cameron Wolfe, covers the NFL nationally for NFL Network. He was pretty gracious when I first started, like I said, on the Colts beat. And obviously he had a lot of insight when it came to the biggest pick of this offseason, biggest decision of this offseason, and potentially the biggest player to come out of his draft class if everything clicks for Anthony Richardson. Got some time down there in Florida with his family. Very humble kid, and we'll see if it all clicks. Because, I get it. Great kid, great arm, great talent. But can he put it together, Jimmy?
It's reps for me. Same thing that Cameron said. Again, we're not in those conversations, so perhaps maybe there is issues with learning the offense that Shane Steichen wants to have on a week-to-week basis. Maybe it is that he feels like because of those hypothetical shortcomings that may or may not exist in this scenario, he's not ready. But if it is a lack of reps, which has been the biggest knock on him, baptism by fire is sometimes the way to go. Put him out there. Let's roll if you're a Colts fan in terms of what this future face of the franchise is going to bring to the table as a rookie. Expectations tempered, but at the same time, there's a fine line between having those expectations tempered, and we've had this conversation with a number of different reporters, color analysts, whatever the case may be, mentioning that it feels like they could walk away from this season as a Colts fan, maybe not with the win-loss record they wanted, but happy with the results and the progress of this next generation of Colts players. Same thing the Pacers just went through. That's the exact vibe in a perfect scenario outside of winning, which everybody wants, is walking away a similar fashion the way the Pacers did, that the win-loss wasn't there, but man, this young core is fun, and there's reason for optimism for how you're building in the offseasons to come.
You have to feel that way. Mm-hmm. I think that is the overarching goal that you want to see. You cannot, and I get your point that you were making yesterday and the last few days about who cares about 9 wins, a postseason berth, even a division title, if it hampers your long-term goal. You're not in a position to win now. I could truly understand if your roster was everything but the quarterback. If you were... This
was San Francisco
exactly.
Right now.
I was going to say that. If that was the case, then I can see why you would go that route. However, this is a long-term thing, whether they want to call it a rebuild, retool, whatever. It is something that's going to take a few years to get together at least. And so that is the mindset they have to have going into 2023.
It's James Boyd. I'm Jimmy Cook. Eddie Garrison with us as well here on the Fan Midday Show. We've got bets to hand out as the show rolls on. Massive start to the NBA Finals. Game 1 between the Denver Nuggets and the Miami Heat. You can hear that right here at 8 o'clock on 93.5, 107.5. The Fan. Still to come, though, today, Charles McDonald covers the NFL for Yahoo Sports. We'll get more on that national outlook for both the Colts and that QB arms race that has taken place within the AFC. Where does the top end of that spectrum stand up towards the rest of the NFL? Is it another Chiefs Super Bowl? Do the Bills finally get it done? Does Cincinnati make it back? We'll look at all those offseason storylines and moves, and maybe a brief look at the NFC a little bit later with Charles McDonald. More still to come on the Fan Midday Show when we come back. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Fan.
Welcome back to the Fan Midday Show. One more segment here in the 1 o'clock hour. For top of the hour, we're joined by Charles McDonald, covers the NFL for Yahoo Sports. Going to dip our toe back in the NBA waters for just a second. James, we discussed this yesterday, and it's become at least official by way of the team president of the Boston Celtics in Brad Stevens that Joe Mazzulla will remain head coach of the Boston Celtics next year. We discussed that a little bit as whether or not that was the proper move or not. You surprised that they are as public and decisive about it just a few days removed from Game 7?
No, because they paid him already. I thought it was a mistake to pay him already, but
at least it's not Monty Williams money.
Yeah, that's true. But since they gave him the money, I think that that's an instance where you have to just stick with it from a financial standpoint. However, I do think had they gotten swept, the conversation around him staying there would have been a lot harder to have. And so I do think that them coming back in the series, making it to being a game away from the finals, makes it look easier to retain him. But I'll be honest, I don't know if he's the guy to get through to them. I do know that Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum have to get better. Jaylen Brown in particular, like I said yesterday, the left-hand dribbling has to improve. The ability to create has to improve. But Joe Mazzulla, he did look like he was outcoached for much of that series. And with a team that talented, you still should have won it in my eyes. Now, we'll see what it means for the year going forward. You have a full offseason, things like that, which will surely help. But I'm still not sold on him being the guy, but I understand why he's still the guy because of the investment they made in him.
That's James Boyd. I'm Jimmy Cook. Edey Garrison along for the ride as well. We're going to step aside when we come back. Charles McDonald covers the NFL nationally for Yahoo Sports. We'll continue more of that flow of where things stand across both the AFC and the NFL at large with Charles McDonald when we come back on the Fan Midday Show.
Still here in the DrivePeople.com studio alongside Jimmy Cook, Edey Garrison. I'm James Boyd here on 107.5 The Fan, the Midday Show. We have Charles McDonald from Yahoo Sports, covers the NFL nationally, on the line. Charles, before I get into Anthony Richardson, the Colts, I know you were out at Giants practice recently. Paris Campbell is now a Giant. What did you see from him?
First of all, thanks for having me. I've been a big fan of your work for a while. Appreciate finally linking, at least virtually.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But, I think Paris looks like he's in a spot where he's going to at least have a chance to contribute, right? It's funny because someone actually asked Dable about that yesterday before practice, and he had said that when he was with the Bills, they had some pre-draft meetings with Paris, and he was always a fan of his game. And when he was with the Giants, it kind of worked out where he was able to grab a draft prospect that he thought fondly of a few years ago. So, it's hard to parse where exactly all these guys are going to show up, right? Because if you look at the Giants roster, this is a team that has a ton of receivers. It's not a team that has a whole lot of receiver one type talents, but a lot of guys that can kind of play a specific role. But it does seem like they have Paris lined up for a role in the slot if he can stay healthy. And look, he picked that number 0, so we're setting a precedent here. If you're going to wear number 0, you got to get on the field a little bit. But they do seem excited for him. Excited that he's going to be a part of this offense. And I just thought that it was interesting that Dable had noted that, hey, sometimes you meet with a draft prospect and it doesn't work out in the actual draft, but, the NFL is a fluid sport. Things change all the time, and maybe you have a chance to reconnect a few years down the line. That it seems like that's what happened with them.
Yeah, we see Bobby Okereke joining him over there in New York/New Jersey, as I always say, because I found out last season, first NFL season, that they do not play in New York. I'm still mad about this because it's so ridiculous to me. But on a more serious note, Charles, when we look at what the Colts have, obviously the biggest name in this city right now is Anthony Richardson. And from your perspective, what do you think it'll take for him to learn, grow, and step into what people think he can become?
I've always been a believer, and it's not a fully 100%. This is how you got to do it. But I've always kind of been a believer that you got to learn by playing and just kind of take the lumps that come with you, that come with it. And when you look at Anthony, he's such a unique player that even if the passing isn't up to par, early on in his career, he might be the best athlete at quarterback ever. So, and not only that, he's not just an athlete, like he's actually got some real skills as a ball carrier. So there are ways where you can kind of, finagle with the production as he actually gets better and understands, this is what it takes to be an NFL passer. So if I were the Colts, look, this is your wheelhouse unless you show that you're really just not ready for it, in which case you have Gardner Minshew, who could honestly probably start for a few teams right now. I'm not saying that this is, a long-term situation where Gardner is going to be your quarterback, but just as a bridge or backup type, that's a pretty quality guy to have in your locker room. So I think they just kind of need to just let him loose and see what happens as far as Anthony Richardson is going, because when you have that kind of upside, you have that kind of talent, I think he sees the game well. It's just kind of like, all right, the accuracy is a little off sometimes, the footwork's a little off sometimes, but I think just in terms of you look at his prowess as doing quarterback things, reading the field, getting guys in the right spot, he's pretty good. It's just like the accuracy and the timing needs to be a little perfected.
Charles McDonald with us here on the Fan Midday Show, covers the NFL for Yahoo Sports, and a man of impeccable taste because he's a fellow Chiefs fan. Nice enough to take some time with us here on the Fan. Sorry, I needed some eye rolls from my producers. Yeah, no problem. Happy to do that for you.
Here you go with this nonsense.
We've talked a lot this offseason about not just Anthony Richardson, but what Shane Steichen brings to the table, Charles. Obviously, it's too late to change course at this point, but the biggest caution before the Shane Steichen hire was, well, he was able to develop and help reach career heights right out of the gate for Justin Herbert as a rookie, and he had a large hand in the development as well of Jalen Hurts, Phillip Rivers in that last year or two with the Chargers. Before all of that, when you look at Jalen Hurts, you look at Justin Herbert, and you look at Phillip Rivers, and you look at that track record, where's the fine line between, okay, this coordinator has done all of this as a coordinator, how is he able to get not even similar results, but be the right guy to develop and blossom Anthony Richardson, who the Colts obviously hope are their next face of the franchise?
Well, I think the good thing here is all three of those guys are way different quarterbacks, right? Especially when you're looking at where Phillip Rivers was towards the end of his career versus what Justin Herbert stepped into and the crazy arm talent and physical prowess that he has versus Jalen Hurts, who's not your stereotypical drop back passer in the NFL, but the fact that you're able to get all three of these guys, moving in the right direction, I think it speaks volumes, right? Because now we're not boxed into, okay, well, we have an offensive coordinator. He's going to run his style, and that style is X, Y, and Z, and hopefully the pieces fit in around it. It kind of gives you the hope that, he's done this with Phillip Rivers, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts. None of those guys can step in each other's shoes. So hopefully this is a spot where someone like Anthony Richardson, who I think is in a way like kind of a blend of, at least Herbert and Hurts from a physical talent standpoint, you should be able to at least get him moving and figure out some stuff early on in year one because, Steichen, he's set that precedent for himself. I don't know if it's fair to have these expectations on him with like a full-on rookie quarterback, but it's not like Herbert and Hurts have been that far removed from their rookie years themselves, right? And those guys have developed into some of the best quarterbacks in the league. So you got a guy that can at least be open-minded as far as how he's going to put together an offense, how he's going to call an offense. And I think that's an exciting thing to have when you have a quarterback that is as athletic as Anthony Richardson. I would just say for Colts fans, you just got to be patient, right? Because you haven't really done the full rebuild, right? Because you've had a handful of quarterbacks over the past few years, whether it's Rivers, Wentz, Matt Ryan, where you're kind of expecting the production to be a little finalized when you get it. But with Anthony, I think he's a really good quarterback prospect. I think he was appropriately drafted with the 4th overall pick, but he's still a rookie. It's going to take some time. You just got to hope that the pieces that you have in place can kind of revitalize themselves and that Steichen's the right guy for the job.
Well, you don't have to worry about expectations because Jim Irsay has already called him a superhero. Now, he did say there's going to be times where he has to, go through some growing pains, and he didn't draft him to be an Olympic athlete, he drafted him to be a football player, but the word superhero was used multiple times after the draft, so no pressure, Anthony Richardson.
No pressure.
But
let me say this about the Superman quote. We've seen what it looks like with the Carson Wentz situation, what it looks like when Jim Irsay does not have your back. So it's better to be have him calling you Superman than praising the high heavens and thanking God that Matt Ryan's our quarterback in 2022.
Fair point. You got Jimmy cracking up over here.
It's so true, though. You're in the good graces for now, but be careful.
Hey, look, man. Charles keeping it real. I appreciate that. Knew he would keep it real here on 107.5 The Fan. But to take a bigger picture around the league and quarterback in particular, Lamar Jackson, he honestly might have been the biggest story of the offseason before he eventually, negotiated a new deal with the Ravens to go back there. He has more talent there. We'll see them as beat reporters here in Indy in week 3 at Baltimore. What do you expect from him now that he has the contract and presumably the playmakers to do something pretty special here in a loaded AFC?
Oh, now the expectation is you need to play like an MVP, right? Like you're getting MVP money. This is kind of the first year, to me, it feels like, where the Ravens have really, really invested in Lamar as a passer. And I think when you're looking at look, if you're looking at this kind of money, man, it's the passing production is going to have to be a big piece of this. Mm-hmm. And I don't even think that, all of this is Lamar's fault, because the Ravens, they've had this weird thing over the past few years. And he's been part of this where you get to week 14, 15, and the roster's just decimated. Like, you're just not playing with the same team that you were earlier in the season. So, look, if they can stay healthy, these are the pieces that we're working with. You're going to get Rashad Bateman back from injury. You drafted Zay Flowers in the first round. You've got Devin Duvernay, who's always been a solid little, wide receiver 3 for them. And now you have Odell Beckham, too. And not only that, but you hired Todd Monken from Georgia. And the last time Todd was in the NFL, Ryan Fitzpatrick set the NFL record for yards per attempt in the season. Don't look at the interception totals. Don't look at the touchdown totals. I'm just talking about straight up yards per attempt. Ryan Fitzpatrick with Todd Monken set the single season record for that back in 2018 or 2019. So, look, they're going to air it out, and Todd's, he's kind of an offensive mind like Steichen, where he's going to fit his play calling philosophy based on the talent that he has. So, when you go back to when he was with the Bucs and Dirk Cotter, and you got Jameson Fitzpatrick and Mike Evans. Yeah, we're going to fling the ball down the field and see what kind of big plays we can generate. And then when he gets to Georgia and he's got Stetson Bennett, we can't really fling the ball like that. But what we can do is work to his strengths, running the option game, short and intermediate passing, and we'll try to score a bunch of points like that. So I think, getting those receivers, getting Lamar an offensive coordinator that is going to be creative with him and help him grow as a passer, the expectation should be that he gets back into MVP talk this year. And he was there for, let's call it the first 5 or 6 weeks last year. And then, it started to fall apart with the injuries and just like the same old Ravens malfeasance that we've seen over the past, it's called 2-3 years. So expectations when you get that contract high, as they should be.
Charles McDonald joins us, covers the NFL for Yahoo Sports. Charles, we had a conversation earlier in the show with Cameron Wolfe of NFL Network regarding Jonathan Taylor and him entering the final year of his contract with the Colts. Now, I've always been of the mindset in this day and age in the NFL that it's foolhardy to break the bank for a running back when more often than not those contracts age worse than almost any other position on the field, invest in other areas of need instead of running back. But Jonathan Taylor obviously had a rough year last year, dealt with injuries, but he's only 24 years old, one of the most dominant players in the sport at his position. Is there a feeling of maybe it's okay to break the bank a little bit more if they want to, assuming they don't tag him or go a different route with a fifth-year option for him next year, knowing that you have that luxury of the rookie contract with Anthony Richardson? Or should they prioritize different areas in this rebuild that's going on here in Indiana?
I think for especially for the quarterback that you drafted, this is probably one of the core guys that you want to keep around. And the good thing is you're in year one of Anthony's deal, and with a running back extension, there's no way that in Anthony down the line Anthony Richardson extension would overlap with this. So you should still have some cap relief on that part. But to me, Jonathan Taylor is a guy that you probably want to keep around just because we know that he can be a focal point for this offense. And I would just be curious, okay, we know last year was a down year for him, but what does this look like with a quarterback who's an actual rushing threat? Instead of, I know Sam Ehlinger had his little Tebow moments at times, but the Anthony Richardson, that's a bit of a different beast. So I would be trying to get him on a deal. We'll see what the Saquon deal ends up. I'm sure that his eventual deal would look like that. But I think in this specific case, it probably makes a little more sense to keep Jonathan Taylor around. Like you said, he's a young guy. Hopefully last year was just a blip on the radar for him and guys like Quentin Nelson, and then you can kind of move this thing back in the right direction. I think what's kind of intriguing about this spot for Anthony Richardson is that there are guys on this offense that we know have played good football before, even if last year wasn't it. And if you're not out on, a Jonathan Taylor or a Quentin Nelson, then this offensive core, it gets a little exciting, I think, when you think about what guys have done in the past and really how attainable it is for them to do it again in the near future.
Speaking of contracts, Michael Pittman Jr. is also up for a contract, and I believe his is a little more complicated than JT because of his position, the quarterback play, things like that. How do you see that unfolding potentially, given that he probably wants to be paid as a wide receiver one, but hasn't had the numbers to back it up for a variety of reasons?
Right. Yeah, and it's not all his fault that his numbers haven't been as good as he would want them to be. But this is honestly where I struggle as far as wide receiver evaluation sometimes, because he's someone you would like to have on your team. But at the end of the day, it's how much are you breaking out for a high-end wide receiver 2 or a low-end wide receiver 1? Someone where, ideally they have a running mate. It's not Justin Jefferson. It's not Devontae Adams. It's a couple tiers below that. You still like to have them, but I think the contract has to make sense for both sides. But what's interesting about wide receiver contracts is it's starting to get a little inflated. And I wonder what's going to be the breaking point where teams maybe we start scaling back on this a little bit. There's a lot of guys who are drafted, on the second day of the draft, early day 3, that come in and have long, productive careers. And maybe they don't need to break the bank for for someone like Michael Pittman. You know, I don't think it's like quite at the level of where the running back conversation has got, but you know, paying Justin Jefferson $30 million a year when his production is kind of dependent on another player, I don't know if that's going to be the norm that we continue to see moving forward.
Charles, I want to look at the NFL as a whole for a second with true contenders, and let me know if I'm too off the walls with this. When you look at the AFC, I see a number of different teams that could potentially contend for the Vince Lombardi Trophy. Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, New York, Miami, potentially throw Baltimore in there if they're able to finally piece things together, and that's not even including some of the lower tiers like Jacksonville or the Chargers if either of those teams are able to take leaps forward. When I look out in the NFC, I see Philadelphia and I see San Francisco as legitimate teams that would instill fear to me if I'm an AFC team. Am I off base with that? Am I being disrespectful towards Minnesota and Dallas? Or is this really what looks like a very one-sided dominance conference by conference when you look at it in those terms?
Oh, Minnesota's fake. That's a sell stock team all the way. But it's obviously Philadelphia, San Francisco. That's the first class. I don't even know if you can really make a case outside of like Dallas for a team even being close to that tier. I'm a pretty big fan of Dak Prescott. But even then, like you're about to rely on Tony Pollard to kind of carry the load. We don't know if he can do that. They've got some young guys on defense that kind of need to step up. I mean, they're one of those teams that has a top heavy roster. But when you look at the Eagles and the 49ers, I think they're more complete, which is crazy to think about in just like how this is stacked up for the NFC, right? Where there's 3 teams that you feel like have a shot to win it all. I don't know. I don't really know like what would be next. Maybe if Jordan Love pops off, or Justin Fields goes crazy, or Derek Carr finds catches lightning in a bottle in New Orleans. But those are your 3 teams that are probably going to be fighting for the title at the end of the year. And then in the AFC, it's like every division except for the South feels like World War III, right? Where if you just look at the AFC North, you got Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett. AFC East, Josh Allen, Tua, Mac, Aaron Rodgers. AFC West, Russell Wilson, Mahomes, Jimmy G, theoretically, and then Justin Herbert. Like it's a dogfight out there, and I kind of wonder when the bounce is going to tip back to make it a little bit more even. Because if I was a quarterback right now, I'd be trying to get to the NFC. So earlier in the show, I know it says on my Twitter bio I'm a Chiefs fan, but I'm really a Falcons fan. And what prompted me to put that in my bio was when they decided they weren't going to trade for Lamar Jackson.
Okay. All right. Well,
I was lifelong Chiefs
so
fan.
you took that compliment that I gave you and ran with it, though. Now I feel like this whole thing's been a lie.
Look, that's up to you to believe, man. I got my own problems.
Fair. It wasn't because Andy Reid gave you that great compliment? It wasn't that? Nothing to do with that?
Well, see, that's how I got the Chiefs as the team that I was going to turn to after the Falcons decided to spurn me. You know,
makes sense.
Look at this. We Lamar Jackson, he would be the best quarterback in the NFC, and they said, "Nah, I'm good." Okay, so whatever.
Well, yeah, it's because he was hurt, and every game counts, and. Never mind that we actually pursued Deshaun Watson and he missed games for other reasons that had nothing to do with injuries and things like that. So,
yeah, 3 almost 3 seasons, right?
Yeah,
ridiculous.
It is what it is. But I will say this: looking at that AFC West, obviously the Chiefs are top dog. I believe the Chargers are gonna have something to say about it. Maybe not much because it's hard for me to pick against Mahomes.
Don't worry, they'll pick him. Everybody will pick him. Give it 3 months. It'll be on the NFL Network. They're winning the West.
Yep. But and then I get to run back. Mahomes is the most underrated quarterback in the league.
Oh my goodness! I mean, and honestly, it's not a crazy take. Seriously, considering his contract and where it is now, wow. But looking at Denver or the Raiders, what situation are you stepping into as a better one, considering Russell Wilson, the struggles he had last year? The questions of if he can be a great quarterback outside of Seattle, and also the Raiders when it comes to you get Jimmy G moved on from Derek Carr, but now Jimmy G is hurt, and you don't know if he's going to be available, for an entire season, which he hardly ever is.
Well, yeah. Well, with those teams, it's always with you have to start off with, right, we are chasing Patrick Mahomes. And to a lesser degree, we're kind of chasing Justin Herbert, too. So whichever team has the most quarterback stability, which I think in this case is the Broncos. If I was, and look, with the Broncos, I understand like there should be a lot of concern with how Russell Wilson played last year, but before he got hurt that last year in Seattle, he was still Russell Wilson, and I just find it a little bit hard to believe that guy is 100% totally gone. So I'm going to throw the Broncos there. But just to say, like, speak on the Raiders real quick. If I was a Raiders fan, I'd be furious, bro. You kidding me? We didn't. So at the time of the draft, right? So if we work back on the timeline of all of this, at the time of the draft, they knew that Jimmy had a bum foot, and they didn't even try to make a move for a quarterback, which I think is it's a little bit crazy when you're talking about, okay, well, we are like, as far as our vision goes, and are we tanking? Are we buying? Are we selling? Are we trying to compete and be a championship team? They're like the island of misfit toys. Okay, you got Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, guys who are legitimate superstars at their positions, and then but the rest of the defense isn't that great. Max Crosby was the rare example of a defensive lineman that played, about 95% of the snaps for the Raiders defense last year, which is really unheard of at that position. It's a super duper top heavy roster. And then you sign a quarterback who might not be able to play this year, or if he does play, it's going to be fragile. And your insurance is Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell. To me, that just has disaster written all over it. And it's interesting to me that Josh McDaniels, he continues to choose comfortability from his Patriots days over thinking outside the box and trying to get something a little more stable. Because, yeah, it's nice that Jimmy knows the system. What's not nice is that he might not be able to play. And you should be able to pivot as a coach, because one of the most important things that you can be as a coach is a good teacher. And if you're at the point where you can't teach your offense to anyone else, you need guys that have already known it for a decade, you should probably look inside, because this is not a stable situation, and it's almost, to me, like asking to be fired after the season's over.
Never change, Raiders.
Does Russell Wilson end the Let's Ride this upcoming season, or does he just stick with it because that is the Russell Wilson we have come to know, who is always going to be on brand to the nth degree?
It's tough because you've become a meme because of it. So no one else is going to stop saying it, especially if they start struggling. So I think you just kind of just lean into the whole ordeal, right? Let's ride, Broncos country. Even after you complete 25 of your 30 passes for 112 yards and the interception, you come out there, you press conference, you say, "Let's ride, Broncos country," because everyone else is already saying it. So you might as well just keep on going with it. Because I can tell you this, I'm not going to stop making those jokes. They got Sean Payton, my arch nemesis, and Russell, who's already made a fool of himself during the last season. So Broncos country, let's ride. 4 yards in a attempt.
I'll tell you what, I would have went full LeBron last season if I was him and just called everyone broke as soon as they started hating on me. Because I was kind of weird. He's too nice, too Christian, but oh goodness, if I had the money he had, the wife he has, oh my goodness, I would have been insufferable as far as let's ride. And yeah, there you go, Charles. So you get it.
This is what I didn't like about when Giannis was you got to look all this perspective. And brother, I hear you. I understand your journey and where you came from. But you are a champion, and you're making $50+ million a year. And it's not NFL $50 million a year. It's NBA $50 million a year, which is actually $50 million a year. Just call us broke and keep it moving. I don't need a life lesson here. But what I do need to be reminded is that I struggle to pay rent sometimes, and you don't. And that's fine.
Charles, last question on my end. Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports covers the NFL for them, making some time with us here on the Fan Midday Show. The dream scenario for any franchise is have the perfect quarterback and pair him up with the perfect coach. There's at least a belief for the first time since I've been alive that Jacksonville finally has that with Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson. When you look at the rest of the AFC South, all the moves they've made to try to play catch up, not just within the AFC's arm race we highlighted earlier, but what Jacksonville was building and cooking up down there in Florida. How big is that gap, and is it at a point where it's insurmountable yet in terms of the AFC South?
It's not insurmountable just yet because we don't know what Anthony and CJ look like, right? We talked about the Colts situation. I think they're in a situation where, like you said before, you had a pretty good defense last year. You got some guys in the offense that had a down year, but it doesn't mean you should totally write them off just yet. And with the Texans, it's dark. It's pretty bad. But just like to put our rosy sunglasses on for a second. Look, they got the best left tackle in the league. They have a really, really high quality starter on the other side in Tyus Howard. They just traded for Shaq Mason. They're going to be trying to run that Shanahan outside zone scheme with the quarterback coach they hired to be their offensive coordinator. They got Damian Pierce. It's not like totally nasty, right? It's probably still going to be bad, but I don't think the Jaguars in a situation where they can kind of let their foot off the gas a little bit or feel good about where they are because they still have some pretty big holes in that roster. You know, Trevon Walker had a pretty quiet rookie year, and they need him to end up being a pass rusher for them. They need to kind of have to reshuffle their depth at cornerback. The linebackers jammed up. So to me, it's like, yeah, we got Trevor and Doug, but this is still a Trent Baalke constructed team. I think you see that in ways that's not allowing them to kind of take off from the rest of the division just yet.
Charles, appreciate the insight, the humor, the pettiness, all of the above. We'll catch up soon. Keep up the great work at Yahoo. You know, safe travels around the country and things like that. I'm sure we'll cross paths here soon.
And Charles, you can be a part of Chiefs Kingdom as long as you want. You're welcome.
I will. I will. I mean, no one can beat my ass, so it's fine.
Thanks, Charles.
All right, later, guys.
That is Charles McDonald, covers the NFL for Yahoo Sports. You know, you can follow him on Twitter at 4Vets. He is, or 4Verts, I'm sorry. He is hilarious and actually very honest when it comes to the NFL, the league we're looking at. I thought his comments on Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes were all hilarious, but his comments in regard to Anthony Richardson were about what we've heard. Play the guy. You got to play him. He's got to get experience. I know that was music to your ears, Jimmy. I've been playing devil advocate all week. As a beat reporter, I selfishly want to see the guy play. And I do think that as long as, again, the gap isn't humongous between him and Gardner Minshew, we should see him sooner rather than later. And that in and of itself will define a new era here in Indy for sure. Good or bad. I mean, we'll see how it goes. We don't know just yet. But given his tools and just what's been built around him, it's hard for me to picture someone else starting at quarterback for this franchise, given how much they've already invested into Anthony Richardson.
You and I are on the same team in regards to if it's an actual matter of he's not understanding things to the point that it would set back his development or cause more harm than good, then yeah, of course, you go with Minshew and you wait until you feel like he's really ready. That's not the vibe I'm getting right now based on just the very little that we have, but the handful of nuggets that we have from the coaching staff, from the beginnings of OTAs. And that picture is going to become clearer the further we get along with OTAs and then once training camps arrive next month. However, you're darn right that's what I want. I want the hype train to begin. And you do too, as you mentioned there. We both want it to happen, as does all of Colts Nation, for sure.
Quarterbacks sell. You know, you want clicks, you want views, you want subscribers at The Athletic. You want the quarterback to play. But again, I do think that it'll be fun to dissect it as it goes on, because the crazy part about this is we're going to have the same conversations on end until we get a decision made. And even then it's going to be, was it the right decision? You know, was it quick enough? Was it too fast? Things like that. So there's multiple layers to this thing, and I do think there's multiple ways to look at it. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, you know, if you really got a dude, because as it was laid out by you, Cameron, Charles, the arms race in the AFC is unbelievable when it comes to the talent, and specifically the talent at quarterback. You need a dude just to give you a chance, because the dude who's the big bully, the big homie on the block, that is Patrick Mahomes, and you need someone who, obviously, I don't think anybody's going to be as good as that guy because he's an all-time great already, but you have to get someone who gives you a chance to at least knock him off, once every now and then, to give you a chance to do something special in the playoffs.
We're getting very close to the end game in terms of the lead up to game 1 of the NBA Finals. You can catch that right here at 8 o'clock on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. As we roll through the show, coming up here about 2 segments from now, around 2:45 or so, we'll hand out our bets ahead of game 1, final thoughts and predictions. When we return, though, where's the dollars and cents market at this point for DeAndre Hopkins? And a wild story involving investigations surrounding NBA and one referee in particular. We'll get into that when we come back here on the Fan Midday Show, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Back here on the Fan Midday Show with Edey Garrison. I'm Jimmy Cook, James Boyd, along with us as well here on the Fan. We're going to have NBA Finals bets and final prognostication in that realm coming up here in just about 12 to 15 minutes as we get set for game 1 of the NBA Finals. Again, you can catch that right here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. Of course, we'll have the Ride with JMV with John's return here in just a little bit as well at the top of the hour. But 8 o'clock, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. Heat Nuggets, game 1 of the NBA Finals. One person that will not be a part of the NBA Finals is Eric Lewis, longtime referee in the association.
Oh, I applaud you.
Thank you. I was waiting for that. I appreciate it.
You finally got it right.
There was rumblings last week on Twitter from a handful of accounts that had found a Twitter handle that was being used to specifically defend Eric Lewis and other officials from online critiques and from the masses and the toxic aspect that is social media at times. Word to the wise, for anybody in any walk of life, if you have any platform where people could critique you on social media, avoid it. It could be far better off for both your mental health space as well as perhaps being tempted to make a burner like Eric Lewis allegedly did here for your long-term sanity and your long-term opportunity within your profession. Because in this instant, having worked each of the past 4 NBA Finals, this time Eric Lewis not one of the 12 who will work the Finals featuring the Nuggets and the Heat. A couple things. Because the NBA has launched an investigation whether or not it violates their terms with officials, and that's a little bit of a more complicated avenue. But to summarize it, basically referees are frowned upon from discussing or getting on the defense with their dukes up, so to speak, with how they do their jobs in certain scenarios. One would be, in this case, a violation of policy of doing it in an unauthorized manner, in this case by making a burner account. So, James, I ask you, what is more ridiculous? By the way, the account which was allegedly used from Lewis, name on the account, Blair Cutliff was the alias that was used there. And there's a long screen grab of tweets of, oh, I can't believe what Eric Lewis and his crew are doing. And it's like, he's trying his best out here. Or it would just be like little stuff like that. And you can still find the screen grabs online. What's more ridiculous, though? The fact that here we are in 2023, and you made the joke earlier that any form of education to work in professional sports could not have prepared any of us for what it's become. More ridiculous that the NBA is launching an investigation into this potential burner account, or the idea that a veteran referee would have the burner account in the first place.
I'll raise you one and go, what if it's really just a fan who's obsessed
I really hope it is.
with him? Because I feel like all three scenarios is ridiculous, but I do understand the NBA's perspective on this. You have to be serious about this. Obviously, you don't want referees interacting on social media like that.
This is allegedly, by the way, on the front. I know I've said that a couple of times,
Definitely
but the
allegedly.
investigation is launched to see whether or not it was actually Eric Lewis that did this. But either way, the idea of it is serious enough in the NBA's mind to have the investigation and withhold him from the finals. There's a chance, like you mentioned, a fan did this.
Yeah, and one of the last tweets from the account was saying it was basically like his brother or something like that. So, if you're Eric Lewis and you're like, man, my brother did this, we got to square up because you're messing with my money and my opportunities. But I do think that it is another day in NBA Twitter, because NBA Twitter is ridiculous. All the takes, just the media around that league in particular is usually pretty ridiculous. So to see this kind of come out, if I had to pick a league for it to happen to, it probably would be that league because of how much drama is in it. But I mean, at the end of the day, for the fans' sake, for the players' sake, they have refs. They're going to be out there, and the game's going to be decided in between the lines as it should be. But this is my point. I am Team KD when it comes to Twitter pettiness. I don't know if refs can have burner accounts, but I'm sure athletes do. Use it. And even if you don't want to use a burner account, you can be like KD, who got exposed, and he's like, you know what? You exposed me. You caught me. I'm going to use my real account and just attack every single troll. And I get it. People are like, who cares? You make all this money. Why should you care about what they think? Because pettiness feels good.
It does. It does indeed. By the way, I love this story as a whole. Like, I love because, like, I'm sure there's somebody that could be like, oh, you just don't understand. Like, this is very, could change the entire just complexity of the NBA and what it is. I think it is absolutely hysterical if it comes out that this is actually what happened. Not that the tweets didn't happen. The tweets happened. Was it Eric Lewis that did it or not? Because the idea that any walk of life, Kevin Durant has proved that. Doesn't matter if you're one of us, one of the common folks, or whether it's a high-up NBA official, or whether it is Kevin Durant. Nobody's above the pettiness. Nobody's above the burner accounts. I think it is absolutely hysterical that there would be somebody looking for different comments about their job and then going after them through a burner. It's great. Yes. I love it.
And here's a hot take for you that fans may not agree with. Fans who always harp on the refs, who know every single ref by name, always tweet about them, oh, this guy doesn't want our team to win, are losers. Those are the fans.
Unless it's Scott Foster, like, you're okay.
I mean, no, I'm serious. I mean, it just bothers me that has become a normal thing for fans to argue about. And after every single game, no matter if it's college or the NBA, and I get it, there's been some, especially in college, there's been some rough games just overall. But to see it as this one-sided thing, oh, this ref is out to get me, is so annoying to me, and it's such a loser mentality. I'm like, no, you did not win that game because you were not good enough to win it, especially at the level of the NBA where there isn't a one-off game that could decide your future in the postseason. You have to win a series. So you cannot tell me that a referee swung an entire series in favor of the team you're rooting against or for.
Are you sitting here and telling me
so annoying
that you did not pop bottles with celebration when Chris Paul finally achieved the crowning achievement of his career by finally defeating Scott Foster? You're telling me that you were not just doing circles around your house?
Oh, my goodness. I was not. And I understand the narrative. And honestly, it makes for a hilarious story. But in all reality,
that one was pretty insane. You got to admit, though.
Oh, it was.
Like whether or not it was just a long string of coincidences or not. And I agree with you. Some of it is just sour grapes. Get over it. Like, you lost the game. But when you see a trend that big, it's hard not to dive into it. And I love stirring the pot. I'll go with it all day.
Exactly. So
fan.
when I see the tweets where people complain about that and then the response is cry more, I love it because it's like whatever you do is not going to change the outcome of the game unless you're able to investigate actual, referee misconduct like they had back in the day. What are we talking about here? I mean, I feel like it's just a loser mentality. That's just me.
Is potentially having a burner account and criticizing fans or punching back with fans when they are coming after you as an official, if that is what happened here, because again, the NBA is still within their investigation of if it was actually Lewis that did it, is the fact that it could have possibly been him, and this has become a story that's been picked up nationally, worthy of excluding him from an NBA final spot?
I think so, because unlike players, the referees don't have like post-game media where they have to answer for every single thing that they do.
There's just one guy as
exactly. They have
crew
the,
chief.
They have the pool report.
Right.
You go ask the crew chief, and even then the answers are
they're very
very
funny.
vague, and there's no video interaction of this, so you can't really see how they responded when they were pressed on a question or an issue and things like that. So
that's where a lot of that stems from, by the way. You talk about fans being frustrated.
Yeah.
It's when you have that, there's no real accountability other than that pool reporter conversation and occasionally the last 2 minutes, and then you read it and they're not going to betray one of their own.
No.
Even if what they're saying is totally to the contrary of what video would show, they're going to stand by what they called because it's a brotherhood, it's a collect. I understand that, but that's where a lot of the issues stem from with fans.
100%. But if they had those opportunities to maybe engage more with the media and with fans, then having a burner to me wouldn't be that big of a deal because you're always interacting. But to do it in sort of like this cloaked, veiled way, to me, would not be a good look for the league. And obviously they're going to take it very seriously and investigate it. But trust me, I will not be following this story very closely because I'll be following the finals and the players in it that include Nikola Jokic, Jimmy Buckets, and I guess that race to see who can get their first ring.
Well, we're just trying to garner up more followers for you, so I'm going to continue to be friendly in that regard. You heard James. The second that you get an update on this Eric Lewis story, he's at Romeoville Kid.
Lord
Be sure to send those articles his way so he can stay in the loop because he's going to be so focused on the finals. I understand.
Some people want to see the world. Some people want to see the world burn, and that is you. You want to see my timeline burn.
I'm the Joker today, outside of Nikola Jokic. That's what I'm rolling with today.
Well, I'll say this too, and I've been seeing this tweet floating around since we're in the Twitter sphere world. The Heat Nuggets, and it's like, what is this, my 6th grade lunch meal? It's hilarious, just considering the funniness of the names. But I'm looking forward to tonight. I think that the Heat have to steal this game to have a chance of winning the series. I don't think you can beat Denver trailing in the series at all. I think you have to be ahead or even until you pull it off. But in my heart of hearts, Jimmy, I just don't see how Miami has enough to get over the hump. I get it. Team of Destiny. It's a great story. It's a great lesson for kids. Believe in yourself, stay together. Anything's possible. But then sometimes you get taught a nice lesson in life where even if you train very hard, you work very hard, you prepare very hard, you believe in yourself, some people are just better. And I think that, Nikola Jokic is training just as hard, playing just as hard, just as smart, more talented. And he might just be that player that ruins what has been a great story. I don't think it ruins it, but it doesn't end with that movie-like storybook ending.
Do you think Coach Spo, Eric Spoelstra and company are going to use Bam Adebayo in like as many pick and rolls as possible to try and wear down Nikola Jokic on the defensive end?
I don't think so because I don't think that Bam is a good enough scorer to make it fruitful enough. I understand that the Lakers tried to do that a little bit with Anthony Davis, who's a better scorer than Bam, because Bam has these stretches, Edey, where he just can't score. And so that, to me, makes it hard to continually run the action through him. And that, to me, is the next step in his game to get better. But the biggest thing, I think, will be, can you put him just in a multitude of pick and roll actions, period, where you're forcing him to either help him recover or he's in drop coverage and you're able to attack the rim or get open looks that way. Because to me, if you're counting on Jimmy Butler, Caleb Martin, a few other of your wings to get downhill and force him to be a rim protector, then maybe you can get him in foul trouble. But even then, he's still pretty good at just walling up and being big, which he's already 6'11". So just put your hands up, go straight up, and usually that'll bode well for you on the defensive end.
Anything that you can do to attempt whatsoever to wear down Nikola Jokic, which I think we've learned this postseason and throughout the entirety of the regular season, is somewhat of a lost cause, is going to be paramount to Miami in a lot of ways to how they can dictate both the tempo and the pacing of where this series go and where game one ultimately goes. For me, this isn't make or break necessarily, but you need, whether it's just wear and tear, whether it is maximizing the amount of effort that Jokic is having to put out there. And again, it's probably not going to matter in the long run. You need mini victories within the battle that will be this series when you have some of your deeper size on your bench get out there. When Cody Zeller's out there, not necessarily from an offensive standpoint, from a defensive standpoint. When you likely increase Kevin Love's minutes as a whole, that again is more from an offensive standpoint than a defensive standpoint. But you have a wide variety of big men that you're going to try to package out there when you're not using Bam. I think ultimately a lot of it is going to go through pick and roll situations that allow good fluid ball movement and hoping that what has happened with the role players on Miami's team can continue to carry the day. Caleb Martin doesn't have to, as I joked earlier, average 26 necessarily for him to win this series, but you need it in bursts like you got against Boston. Same with Gabe Vincent, same with Strus, same if you eventually get Tyler Hero back. Which, before we get to our bets and step aside for the final time, which of these cliches is overused more going into game one? The fact that Miami's going to be exhausted from 7 games, or the fact that Denver might be rusty because of the amount of rest they've had? This is only like the third time, I think in the last 20 years or so, where a team has had as much time off as they have had going into the NBA Finals.
That Miami's going to be exhausted. I think if you can't have energy or some oomph coming out of you for the NBA Finals, then what are you playing for? So I think they're going to be energized. I think they'll be fine. I think the elevation in Denver will be a bigger factor, but they've been there for a few days. Maybe their bodies have acclimated at least a little bit, to the climate, not climate, but the elevation over there. So that to me is the biggest thing. And then just from a schematic standpoint, you can scheme up as much as you want to, but to me, you have to win the minutes when Nikola Jokic doesn't play. Assuming he plays 40 minutes, that means those 8 minutes he's not out there, you have to be plus 10, plus 7, something where you're not losing those minutes and he's getting rest. Like, you have to do something, and obviously the best defense is, when he's on that bench and you're putting up points. That's the best way you can give yourself a chance to win this series, steal game one. And again, I'm rooting for chaos, so Miami, please steal game one.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll give final predictions ahead of game one of the NBA Finals, give out some baseball bets as well, closing out a solid show here on the Fan Midday Show.
The summer startups.
7-5, The Fan.
Final time on the Fan Midday Show. Jimmy Cook, James Boyd, Eddie Garrison guiding us through the afternoon. Game 1 of the NBA Finals underway tonight as we finally get on that journey to crowning an NBA champion. Miami Heat, Denver Nuggets, 8 p.m. here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan, your go-to source for NBA Finals Game 1. Be sure to be a part of it. We got some bets for you in that regard, plus some baseball bets as well. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get a prediction or two out of one James Boyd, and even if he's not putting money on it.
The Jay Cook Plays of the Day.
This is me, all right? I'm not an athlete. This is my way. This is how I win.
Today's Plays of the Day. In baseball, we're going to take the Boston Red Sox over the Cincinnati Reds on the money line. That is the longest play of the day at minus 155.
Yes.
Eddie Garrison is applauding because he can finally fade Jay Cook. We'll get to that in just a second. In tonight's Game 1 of the NBA Finals, give me Nikola Jokic over 27.5 total points. But the Miami Heat cover. Scoop the 8.5 tonight. They're going to keep it within range. Denver ultimately wins, but we're not playing money lines with that kind of juice. You kidding me? Not going to do it. 2-2 yesterday. 4-3 on the week. Eddie, you're licking your chops over there. What do you like today?
Well, I have made a vow to myself I will not bet on the Reds, and I am sticking to that vow. I have not bet on them to win or spreads on them at all this year. I am not touching them. But it's always good when you go the other way because the Reds always either win when you bet against them or they lose when you bet with them. Today you're betting against them, so they're going to win. I know that. That's good for me and my heart as a Reds fan right there. I'm sticking in the MLB tonight. I'm going with Framber Valdez and the Houston Astros minus 1.5. It's plus 114 on the odds there. I like the matchup with Valdez and home. Reed Detmers is a lefty that the Astros have hit well so far in his young career. And when you look at tonight's NBA game, I've got two player props for you, one and under, one and over. I'm going over 16.5 on Bam Bam. No real protection at the rim for Denver. So that's going to result, I think, in an effective Bam Adebayo. They need him to get going against Nikola Jokic. I think he'll be able to get a step past Jokic, get to the basket, get a couple of easy bunnies, maybe a couple and one opportunities. But over 16.5, that's a low number considering he was averaging just about 22 a game in that opening round for the Miami Heat. And then I'm going to go under on the number of Jimmy Butler at 26.5 at plus 100. I think
I'm shocked.
Aaron Gordon defensively is a really bad matchup for Butler. He can hang with them in physicality, and now you're going to have to force Jimmy Butler to shoot a lot of jump shots, and just not sure how those legs are going to hold up.
I'm not saying I disagree with Eddie's bet, but when he said he had an under on player props, and he's frequently gone after me for taking Jimmy Butler's over, I'm not going to change the bet tonight, but I'll be back on that train at some point during this series. Any action for you, or are we just taking a prediction for how this series is going to unfold?
Well, the Heat still game 1.
They will?
They will.
Okay.
Guaranteed.
Love it. Love it. Ode to Chuck there. Love it.
And I do think, if I'm going to say that, you got to take the overs because you need Bam and Jimmy to have some big games in Denver. And again, I'm just rooting for chaos. I don't want to see a sweep. Not because I don't think Denver is great and they don't deserve to win, whatever fashion they want to. Just as a fan of the sport, I kind of want to see some drama in the NBA Finals.
We're not going to talk to you again until next week. James Boyd of The Athletic with us covers the Colts. Does a great job there. You can follow him on Twitter at Romeoville Kid. So when you look at series predictions, where do you have this going down, games and winner?
My heart wants to say Miami in 7, but my head, my thinking brain says Nuggets in 6, maybe even 5, because they're just the better team. They play smart, unlike Boston, and they're more talented than Miami. So I think Nikola Jokic gets his first ring. Denver gets their first championship as a franchise, and we look at him and Jamal Murray in a totally new light with their talent.
I think it's Nuggets in 6. Eddie, do you have any interest in getting in on series predictions in terms of how this thing goes?
I am with you guys. I'm going Denver in 6.
Does anybody in this room, you especially, James, you're picking Miami tonight, have a sense of change on those predictions if Miami is able to take game 1? Does that sway you in general how the series goes?
Not at all. I think if they were to win game 1, then Denver will win the next 2 games, probably the next 3.
So you're potentially looking at 0-1 Sixers here, or are they take a game out of the gate.
Yeah, you just
Allen
want
Iverson
to you
style,
want
then
to
it's
get
over.
one,
Okay.
get a chink in the armor. I was telling you the other day, I believe it was yesterday, was the 5-year anniversary of the LeBron 51-point finals game. JR forgot to score, and they get swept. They were not going to win that series by any stretch of the imagination. You just want to put a chink in the armor and say you were there, and you had, at least for a day, their number. That's it.
That's James Boyd. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at RomeoVilleKid all year long, covering the Colts. We'll have him back in here. Great week. James, been fun having you in here as always.
Appreciate you. You haven't kicked me out yet, as I keep saying, so I'll be back next week. Should be fun.
Special thanks you to Michael Scotto, Sam King, Cameron Wolfe, and Charles McDonald. Podcast will be up 1075thefan.com. Next, it's a Ride with JMV, and John's back. Stay with us.